was wrong to say. I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through color glass, time rolls on enough to let me move on past. But every little now and then it creeps on back to shape my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this April 7th, 2026. Well, last season, we had an episode on understanding Catholicism. Lots of questions come in about the topic, and so we made an attempt to answer it from a multi-dimensional perspective. There were so many questions, thanks Brandon, that we had to do a part two. So that's tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello, everybody. Once again, I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, with my co-host, Jamie Wolf.
Good evening, everyone.
And this is Vestiges After Dark, where we talk about the esoteric, the supernatural, the spiritual, the paranormal, the esoteric, metaphysical, you name it, we cover it on this show. But tonight, it's more theological, although we do get into some of the more esoteric Christianity, and we've also sometimes answer some of these things from a metaphysical perspective or a multi-religious perspective. So you're getting a really balanced, well-rounded education tonight on Vestiges After Dark as it pertains to the subject of Catholicism. That's going to be for the next 3 hours. We're not even doing our normal segment on the questions from the ether because there's just so many questions. We're probably going to have to do a part 3, to be honest with you. But we'll see how things go. It should, at the very least, be enlightening as far as we can get into it. And, you know, if there's questions or follow-up in the chat, we will try our best to answer those as well. We've been on break. You know, we started this season. We did 3 episodes, and, then Lent came and Holy Week and everything else, and that really takes a lot of time. And it's a lot of work and a lot of stress for us, I think, to do that week because it is what it is. But when there's liturgies, we can't really do this show, so that's why we've been away for the last 3 weeks. But we're back now, and we should be fairly good to go all the way through to the summer. I think the last episode's in the middle of June somewhere. So got plenty of episodes coming up for you this season. Don't miss any of it. Make sure you're subscribed on our YouTube channel. And we are airing live on TikTok tonight. It took the feed. I think these new settings are working. And so I thought, you know what? There's no guest tonight. I'm not going to inconvenience somebody if there's problems. Let's give it another go tonight. So I tried, and sure enough, we are live on TikTok. So a big welcome to all of our TikTok audience. I know that you're catching a lot of the shorts Now
Come on in.
Yeah, now you can catch the whole 3-hour show because sometimes you guys on TikTok, and not just TikTok, but Facebook and YouTube as well, you look at those 1 minute videos, actually 1 minute videos, and you think that you've got the whole topic worked out, and you're trying to educate the bishop on how wrong he is about the things that he's talking about. How about before you do that, you come and you find the episode that the 1 minute clip is from and watch the whole 3 hours first. Then, if you still think I'm wrong, you can come back and then fight with me if you want to. But just a suggestion, that you're not getting the full picture. Those 1 minute videos are just to promote the show, you see. They're not supposed to be terribly comprehensive.
You promoted something, all right.
I'm telling you.
Their hackles up.
They really, it doesn't take much. Doesn't take much for that to happen. Okay, well, anyway, joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates tonight. How you doing tonight, Father?
Whoop, whoop.
I'm doing well. I love this logic, though. It means that I wasted all those years doing theology degrees. I could have just done it in an hour.
I mean, all you needed to do is watch a 1 minute clip on YouTube, and you've got your full theological education right there.
Yep.
Well, an hour would be a PhD, presumably. I get a professor's post off that.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, no, I'm doing okay. I'm kind of like you, no doubt.
Tired.
Post Holy Week exhaust. It's more than tired. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
I do.
I'm just exhausted. It's emotionally and spiritually draining.
Yeah.
It is.
And intellectually too, actually, because most of these liturgies we do. There's only one version of this left in the calendar these days, and so we do one thing once a year, and so every year it's like, what do we do with that? And where does everyone need to stand?
Exactly.
And this year I was also MC for a bishop here in Sydney. So we did Tenebrae and other things on top. So I'm a bit dazed and confused is the answer. So I'm pleased that today's show is on pretty comfortable ground.
I know, it's a very comfortable ground. It's like, I was thinking the same thing. It's like, it's going to be stressful. I'm glad I scheduled this with design. And I didn't know what the hell was going to happen tonight with the ceasefire and everything else, because a few hours ago, Trump's threatening the end of a civilization. So at least now I think there's been a ceasefire declared officially. I'm getting reports of that right now. So I was like, nobody's going to be watching us tonight.
We lived through the Cold War. We're used to this.
I've had to deal with Iran my entire life. That country's been a problem my entire life.
Iran is as old as I am. The current regime is the same age as me.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, but I'm sure Jamie's loving all the armchair generals as well, telling us everything about what military, people that the closest they get to a medal is,
yeah, we've got folks that experts on the video games, Modern Warfare, and all those. They know better than
Well, let's just be grateful. Let's just be grateful that there's, I think, a 2-week ceasefire into effect. I don't know how long that will last or how much it will do, but at least they're not ending a civilization
so far,
tonight.
all ceasefires have been temporary.
Yeah,
very, very temporary.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah. It's true. All right, joining us from Tennessee, we have April Narad. How you doing tonight, April?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready. I'm excited about tonight's episode as well, and I've got a long list of questions.
We do. We have a lot to get to, and so I would say let's just jump right in here. So, Brandon, we left off with Brandon last season on why can't non-Catholics receive communion. Is that where you're at on your list?
I am, but also we've already got a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to do that one first, or if you want to go ahead and start with these on here.
Well, what is the one in the chat?
Might as well. It's
just
okay. The one in the chat will do.
What is the one in the chat? Go ahead and read it.
It says, "Why are human bones, holy relics, Catholics display openly?"
Well, I think we cover holy relics on the last episode of this, like last season. I think we did.
We did.
But just to be a really quick response to that, the relics represent a tangible connection to the holiness of a person that has been confirmed by the church to be in the kingdom of heaven. So this is somebody that is fully alive. You know, you'll hear Protestants sometimes say, why do Catholics pray to a bunch of dead people? Because the church triumphant is anything but dead. We're far more dead than they are. And the only thing that is truly alive would be the kingdom of heaven. So the kingdom of heaven is not an abode for the dead. It's the only true abode of the living. And so everybody there is very much alive and very much capable of being able to assist us. They're fully alive. That's right. So the relic represents a person's triumph over death. So you're holding a remnants of their mortal death, and that they have defeated it in the same way that Christ has by entering into the kingdom of heaven and being part of what the church calls the church triumphant. So the relics represent a connection to that process that we ourselves are trying to achieve. So, I mean, in the sense...
Yeah, and it's a reminder that we can do it.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry, that it can be done.
It can be done. That's right.
Others have done it. You know, because we're not Jesus. We're not the Blessed Virgin Mary. We're very much more like St. Thomas and all of the other heroic Christians that have lived ever since. And so what we don't do is worship those relics. So if Catholics are doing that, then they're doing something wrong, but I don't think anyone is doing that. What they are is a reminder to us that there's hope for us, basically, because other mortals have managed this, or rather, God has perfected these other people, many of whom are deeply flawed. So I've got a relic, I've showed it on the last series, of St. Augustine of Hippo. And St. Augustine was a really flawed person, you know, had a really dodgy youth, was rebellious and all sorts of a notorious sinner.
He loved the ladies.
You know, he did rather like ladies. So for gazing upon that relic is encouragement to me to think, well, if God could perfect St. Augustine, then he can do it to me too.
And another thing I think it's important about specifically when you're talking about first class relics, which are typically, not in all cases, relics of Christ can be, like the true cross is a first class relic, even though it's not a body part. But most first class relics are body parts. They're actual bones or skin or something of that nature, here sometimes, teeth as well. The thing is, that is important because it also reminds us of our own mortality. It is a connection to the fact that what we're here to accomplish, okay? And we're not going through this existence. I don't like calling this existence life because it's not life. It's dying is what this existence is. And we think it's life. We treat it like it's life because it's the only one we know. But it's an opportunity is all it is. It's God giving us a very brief opportunity to attain salvation where real life is. That's where life actually is. And being able to physically see what happens to us when we die is an important reminder that we all do it. We all end up that way, and that should be motivation for working out one's salvation so that we can defeat death in the same way that Christ did. So relics help us to do that. In the
contemporary Western world, the church is the only place where, you know, it's so funny that a lot of people that don't like the church, they'll say, oh, you know, it's all fairyland, make-believe to make yourself feel better. Like, the church is the only place where you're told at least once a year that you're dust and to dust you'll return.
Yeah, it's hardly
on Ash Wednesday.
It's not really to feel good.
We're the ones that are saying, no, you're going to... Like, every funeral service I ever did, certainly in the Anglican church, when I was an Anglican priest, you know, even in the midst of life, we're in death, saith the Lord. Yeah. It's in the Book of Common Prayer.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the church is a place where you're reminded that you're going to die. Not to be morbid and not to say, oh, you know, isn't it all terrible? It's to remind you that life is something you have to choose all the time, every day. Mm-hmm. And it's that decision to choose life, which is the pathway to salvation.
And that it's not about this place. It's not about here. It's to remind us that we leave this place, you know, and we leave this place in that very way, that we become the dust that, you know, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We become that, right? And it's important to keep that forever foremost in our mind. And like you said, it's not about an exercise in being morbid. It's really more so about keeping focus on what matters, and we've lost that connection in our world.
And there is one other tradition with relics, which is exactly related to this, which is that obviously a lot of the early Christians were martyred, and so the celebration of the Eucharist would take place upon the ashes or the remains of because often they were burnt to death. They celebrate the Lord's Supper on top of the relics of the deceased Christians, and that tradition continued. And so right up until the destructive force following the Vatican Council, Second Vatican Council, every altar, and even now today they still put them in every altar in every Catholic church. There are relics.
Even in the Orthodox Church, every antimension has a relic sewn into it.
Has a relic in it.
Yep.
So it's a reminder of that connection to early Christians who were willing to give their lives for the faith and to honor that, and in fact also to sort of say to ourselves we'd be willing to do the same. So it's it's a pretty sobering reasons is the answer.
It is. Yep. Okay, let's get to the first question on our list tonight. So go ahead, April, go ahead and read it again, and we'll see what we can do.
All right. It says, why can't non-Catholics receive communion?
Okay, so this is a good question because there's going to be a few answers that I have for you. What we do in the Nicolean Church is slightly different. There's something called closed communion, which is what both Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches practice. And there's something called open communion, which is something more along the lines of what the Nicolean Catholic Church practices, although it's not completely open, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. Let's first answer it from the Roman Catholic perspective and the Orthodox perspective, because that's going to be the more typical one, the one that this question's about. So essentially, from the perspective of those churches, communion is called communion because it represents not so much you're communing with God, although it is that, but also that you're in communion with the family of God, the church in its truest sense. And so from the standpoint of the Church of Rome or the Orthodox churches, when a person is not in the communion of that church because they practice what essentially would be seen as a heretical belief system, which would be Protestantism or some deviation of Christianity, that is not full unity in the faith and ecclesiastical life or the ecclesial life of that church. And so the church sees communion, sees Eucharist as a expression of that unity. And when that unity does not really exist, it's sort of, I guess you could say it's disingenuous to come up and receive when you're not really professing that same faith with everybody else that's there to receive it, which I fully understand from that vantage point. And I do not have any problem with the Orthodox or the Roman Catholics practicing communion that way. That's their prerogative. And I understand that perspective. Until you share the unity, you don't receive, and it's also, I guess you could say, an incentive to join that communion so that you can be part of that. Of course, the church prays for the eventual unity of all Christians, but it also recognizes that that's not necessarily the case. And another reason that they do this, which I guess we could say is more pragmatic of a reason, is that for Catholics and Orthodox, particularly in the Catholic Church, I'm going to use some Catholic theology here. The Eucharist is not just a coming up to receive the Lord's Supper in some kind of symbolic sense. You're receiving the actual body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ. Most Protestants do not understand that yet. And unless they have been catechized to understand that, and my God, a lot of Catholics don't understand it. So what chance do the Protestants have? Until they understand that, well, it gets into that little kind of part where Paul talks about receiving unworthily and how you kind of drink your own condemnation when you receive, you drink from the cup of salvation, but you're not really fully understanding what it is that you're getting there. So there's that aspect of it. Now, in the Nicolean Catholic Church, we have an open communion. Now, how this works for us, and we have to do it this way because of the type of people we serve. You know, sometimes a bishop has to make a decision to work around some of the restrictions and the hard, die-hard rules in order to best serve the people that the church exists to serve. I don't have the luxury of a, long-standing Catholic community that just comes over here, understands what they're receiving, that's it. We get a lot of Catholics, but I would not say Catholics are the larger part of our own communion. I would say that most of them are fallen away Christians of various denominations. So in our church, our canons state that if you are a baptized Christian, and by baptized I mean validly baptized in the Trinitarian formula by a denomination that does it the right way, then you are welcome to come and receive communion, even if it's your first communion with us, because our communion is the entire Christian church, not just Catholics. And that's because that's what we've been called to serve. That's who we serve. And so, but they always get educated. I don't just be like, hey, come and receive communion. They are, even if it's a brief catechism, I give them an understanding as to what they are receiving. Sometimes when I know I have somebody in the congregation that's going to receive for the first time, I will even have a sermon about the body and blood, soul and divinity of Jesus Christ, so that they understand what they're about to come up and receive, and then the relationship builds from there. I'm not saying that Roman Catholics should do it that way. I'm just saying that the Nicolaitan Church has to do it this way because of who we serve. And that's really the whole framework. I'm so sorry. I hate this system over here. I keep hitting it because my hands like to move when I talk, and I've got too much stuff in my way, so I'm sorry I keep hitting that. If it hurts your ears, I do apologize.
If we ever handcuffed you, you would never be able to speak.
No, that'd be it. I'd be silent. Father Chris, anything that you'd like to add about why non-Catholics and non-Orthodox, well, even Catholics and Orthodox, Orthodox are allowed to receive Catholic communion, but Orthodox are typically discouraged from doing so, and Orthodox would not let Catholics receive their communion. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Shame.
Well, look, some of this is around, to use a secular term, informed consent. It's about saying, I remember, when I was an Anglican, because Anglicans generally will give communion to children quite young.
They have open communion too, don't they?
Well, the same principle. You must be baptized.
Baptized, yeah.
So you must be baptized, but it wouldn't matter if you were a Baptist or a Catholic or Orthodox. Right. I think, look, that's not just because they're slack. It's because they've taken the decision, which I know you have too, and which certainly ICAB does as well. The Brazilian Catholic Church.
Sure.
I'm part of. That baptism is in fact the foundational position. So it's not like saying, we're just a bit slacker than the Catholics. Or
no, the baptism's the communion. That's the communion.
Baptism is the way.
Yeah.
Now, but I do want to kind of give some credence to what Roman Catholics and Orthodox practice, because we both know, well, I certainly know from when I was an Anglican, that Anglicans can believe anything and nothing. Now that's true of Catholics and Orthodox too.
It's true.
But you know that if they were baptized, and the Roman Catholics are still very, how efficacious it is in the long run is a different question. But they do have their schools and they have their catechesis, they have their first confession, their first communion. They do it in that way. So notwithstanding the fact that individual people can, be blasé about these things, the Catholic Church can honestly say, if you are a confirmed Roman Catholic, we have told you what this is, and therefore you have informed consent. And if you're receiving communion unworthily, that's on you. It's not on the bishop. It's not on the priest. It's not on anybody. It's on you. So, so I've got kind of sympathy with their approach.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
because and I know you do too. We take very seriously that the caution of St. Paul, and it's reiterated in the Book of Common Prayer for Anglicans, Episcopalians listening, that you eat and drink judgment on yourself. if you receive unworthily. Now, to a certain extent, we can only receive communion unworthily because we're not perfect. But what the church, what we really do understand by that is that you are, as far as possible, in what is the jargon is a state of grace, but as far as possible, you've been honest with God. That's what it really means.
Yeah.
Now, for Catholics, Orthodox, more Catholic Anglicans, that means you've been to confession. But we have to accept that within Anglicanism and other denominations, there are more evangelical types in there who don't practice that, but nevertheless they take very seriously being in an honest state with God, which also means being honest with yourself as well.
Well, there's a lot of Catholics that don't even see value in confession; they just come anyway.
Oh, I know. That's right.
Yeah.
But like I say, the significant difference is for the priest at the altar, they know somebody. And here's the other thing that I wanted to say. If I go to a Roman Catholic church near you, Bishop Bryan, they wouldn't know whether I'd been through that system or not.
Right.
And if I presented myself for communion, they would give me communion.
They'd let you receive.
So in other words, this isn't the church putting up barriers against you. The whole point is they treat you, and one of the good fruits of Vatican II, by the way, there are some good things in there, is it said, instead of giving you the flipping, minutiae detail of what you must do every day, right? You must fast every Friday and you must do this and you must do that. They treat you like an adult, and they've said, well, look, these are the principles that we've received. These are the truth. This is the truth that have been handed on from age to age. Here it is. And in our age, we've got even less excuse. It's all, you can go on the Holy See website, download anything you like of what's been taught by the popes, by the councils, by anything you like. You can download it for free and read it online. You're an adult. This is the body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus Christ. You must be in a state of grace to receive it. You've got all the information at your fingertips to know what that means. If you come forward for communion, I'm going to assume that you've been through that process. I actually think that's quite a healthy, grown-up way of dealing with people.
I think so.
And the only exception is literally for children who don't know. And I remember, when I was an Anglican priests are actually not allowed to refuse communion to anyone that's already received communion once. So if somebody's come from a church and their 4-year-old was receiving communion, you're not allowed to refuse, right? Because and you can understand the psychological reason for that.
Sure.
But I remember it's very, very difficult because, I'm trying to hand this host over and the child has no idea what's going on. It's a 4-year-old. Yeah. And the mum said, oh, come on, do you want a bicky? And I went, and that's when I did say no.
Yeah.
No, it's not a bicky. And the fact a 4-year-old literally cannot possibly understand that.
Well, I mean, in the Orthodox Church, infants are given communion. But
there's a whole structure around it.
There's a structure. The sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation, and first Eucharist are all handled in infancy in the Eastern Church.
And I actually think that's
Eastern Catholic.
Correct.
It's the ideal thing, I think. But one of the things that makes it a little easier, you might be like, well, how does a baby that can't even chew food receive the communion? Well, the way that the Orthodox administer communion is how that works, because they use a spoon. Mm-hmm. And so basically in the Orthodox churches and the Eastern Catholic churches, the host is leavened bread. It's not unleavened bread. And it's all placed inside the chalice with the wine. It soaks up the wine. And then the priest uses a spoon, and then as the communicant comes up to receive, they open their mouth, they put their head back, and the priest drops the host and the wine into the mouth of the person receiving. Now, for the baby, they typically just take a little bit of the wine, just a little bit, and just dab it on the tongue. That's how it's done in the East, in the Eastern Church, both Catholic and Orthodox.
It's also that's why it's a requirement in the Orthodox Church. And again, look, we're describing ideals.
Yeah.
Do people deviate from this? Yes. There's such a thing called sin and human nature. But they're only supposed to baptize infants in that New Testament context. That the family, the father, the mother, the whole family are committed to Christ and they are communicant members of the church. Therefore, they are bringing up their child in the church. The Orthodox are much better at doing that than Catholics or Anglicans or anybody else.
I agree. Yeah.
They're much more culturally glued together in that. And so, it's a shame that we can't practice that in the West. And maybe it's cause and effect.
Well, there's some benefit to the Western way too, because it is nice to just, it's nice to be how we do it in the Nicolaitan Church typically, and we can use both ways. If it pastorally serves the individual, we choose a method, East or West, based upon the needs of the family. But typically, the way we do it is that, baptism is freely given, and the sooner the better, the earlier the better. Confirmation is kind of when you affirm that faith. So after the age of reason, when you're able to make that determination. First communion, I think that should be young. I really do. As soon as that child is able to receive, comfortably and has some basic understanding as there's something special going on here. I mean, Levi did. I mean, he was receiving since infancy. I was a priest by that point, and so I was the one that baptized Levi. And so when it came to his communion, I mean, he would receive, and at no point did he might not have fully understood. Oh my God, that's Jesus up there, but he certainly did understand there was something very special about this, something very sacred about this, and he was very solemn about it every time, even when he was small. He'd be funny because he didn't quite know what that was, but I remember this one time saying Mass, and the priest holds up the host at the words of institution. I hold up the host, and he'd see it there, and then you could hear him whisper in the back of the church. He goes, "Cookie." Because it looked like a cookie, but to him it was like a sacred cookie. That was a special cookie, it worked well because he fully understands what he's receiving now, and now he's up there at the altar helping me prepare the gifts for the people that come to the retreat house. So it all comes full circle. All right, let's get to our next question. April.
Okay, so the next question is, why must Catholics attend Mass every Sunday?
Well, this is a really important one because I think for people that grew up in Protestant faiths, this is a rule that you might find to be a little bit restrictive. But in the Catholic Church, we'll talk about how the East handles this in a minute. But in the Catholic Church, Mass is what fulfills the third commandment, okay, that the church is to worship God publicly. And that is to be done, of course, on Sunday, or Saturday evening is also Sunday according to Jewish customs. So you can have a vigil Mass on Saturday, which is what the Nicolaitan Church tends to do. But Sunday morning is obviously also a very ideal thing here. So it could be either one, but it has to be Sunday. And then the Eucharistic sacrifice is, of course, the highest act of Christian worship. Which also commemorates not just Thanksgiving for the grace that we are about to receive, but also a commemoration of the resurrection that we are to become, to participate in. So every Sunday is like little Easter. Every Sunday is a celebration of the solemnity of Easter. And to not participate in that is to cut oneself off from that grace, which is, why would you do that, right? And to willfully miss Mass, okay, is actually considered mortal sin in the Catholic Church. A lot of people don't realize that, or they just don't want to accept it. But if you miss Mass for no good reason, by good reason means you ask for dispensation from your pastor or bishop because either there's some reason why you can't. If you're traveling and there's no church within range of wherever it is you're going, that would be a valid reason. If you're really gravely ill, you could request that a Eucharistic minister brings the sacrament to you, but that could be a valid reason as well if there's some other issue going on. But simply because you had to work is not a valid reason. So being cut off from the church is a being cut off from the very grace that saves you. Therefore, to willfully reject that is mortal sin because you're basically saying, God, I don't need you today. And you would have to go to confession in order to come back and receive communion after that because you can't just ignore the Mass in the Sundays that we practice Mass. Now, the Eastern Church has the same basic premise, but a completely different approach to it. They don't do this venial sin, mortal sin, that's a mortal sin, that's a venial sin stuff. They don't really do that. They understand that there are grave sins, grave matters, but they don't really classify them this way. And as far as missing the divine liturgy, they don't call it Mass in the East, they call it the divine liturgy. In terms of missing it, it's not that, oh, you missed Mass, you got to go to confession now, or you missed divine liturgy, you got to go to confession now because, you weren't there, and you didn't have a dispensation, you didn't have a good reason for missing. What they would basically say is, why would you not want to come? That's the bigger problem, is the fact that not so much that you didn't go, but that you thought it would be okay not to. That's where the problem is for them. And the way they see it is, look, you got to eat, right? You eat 3 meals a day. Why do you do that? Or do you got to eat every day, right? I mean, why do you do that? Because you got to sustain yourself physically, right? Well, they see coming to receive the Eucharist every Sunday as sustenance for your spiritual nature. And if you're starving your spiritual nature, well, then we got to ask, why are you doing that? Why are you okay with doing that? So they're not like, oh, you're going to, you committed moral sin, you're going to go to hell now until you go confess this. They don't take that approach. Rome, even they don't really take that approach. That's the implication by saying it's mortal sin, though. But they do have a better way of looking at it and saying, why would you even want to do that? Why would you not come, right? But people do tend to, particularly in the more Protestant, denominations, evangelical denominations, just see it as you can go if it's convenient, don't go if it's not, show up when you feel like it. Maybe you're having a rough week, so you're going to go to church this week. That is completely contrary to how the structure of the commandments are set up. It's not honoring the Sabbath day. It's not recognizing the grace of the church. You're cutting yourself off from the very thing that saves you. That's a very foolish thing to do. And then you wonder why things aren't going well in your life. Well, you don't have much grace left because you're not coming to receive it. So that's part of the issue. Father, anything you could think of that could add to this issue? Because I know this is a big problem for me. I see it all the time.
Sure. I think, what you said about the Orthodox is right, because the Orthodox or the Eastern churches have a much stronger emphasis on this is what God is offering you. So, for example, like the Lenten fast amongst the Orthodox is pretty severe, right?
Yeah.
No oil, let alone dairy or meat. So you can't even cook anything, right? So you kind of eat boiled vegetables and all the sort of stuff that causes great misery for me. But they say, but actually, rather than saying what can't I have, this is what God is offering. So in other words, it flips the thinking from what am I being deprived of to actually God is providing sustenance for me regardless. I can in fact live without meat and dairy and oil, because there are other things that God has provided for me to live on. So that's very much their emphasis. Also at the liturgy, there's a much stronger practice of before the liturgy starts, the priest is out in the church hearing confessions. The expectation really is that you make your confession before every liturgy. So, if you've missed a Sunday, that's just going to come as part of that anyway. Mm-hmm. Like you said, without any other distinction between that or other sins that you may have committed. Mm-hmm. But the other image, which is a biblical one, which might help some of our more people more used to Protestant teaching, is Jesus tells the parable of the feast, right? The wedding feast, and the guests haven't come. Mm-hmm. The invited guests haven't come. Yeah. Now I know there's lots of ways of reading this scripture, but this is quite a useful image to have in your mind about what it means to come on. So you've been invited by God to this. What's more important? And it is about the thing that you're doing instead of being there. You worship more than you worship God. That's the sin. Mm-hmm. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And so it's not, I was hit by a car and ended up in hospital. Obviously, you've not desired that more than being at mass on Sunday. Right. So that's why valid. Well, the tradition is there's 3 reasons to miss mass. Sickness to the point of death, death. Or being in prison for the Lord, right?
Yeah, right. Those are the only 3. Yeah.
So which one is it? But it's much better to have that image that our Lord gives us of the wedding feast that the Lord has prepared and invited you to, and you chose not to come. So don't be surprised if he, when he sends out his angels to gather the dregs of the earth to take seats higher than you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of what Scripture says about it. So, if you got a problem with it, take it up with Christ, because he said it before we did. We're just passing on the message. And another thing I need to kind of add here, because again, the Nicolaitan Church has a unique ministry and it has a very different structure. It is the only one of its kind in the world, right? So we only have one location, and it's the retreat house here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. We do have congregants that are only consider themselves Nicolaitan Catholics and nothing else. We do have Roman Catholics that are part of our communion, and they go to their Roman Catholic churches for Sunday, but then they watch our liturgy online, and they participate in our communion as well, or they come to the retreat house and they do both. We have that. But there are people that just see the Nicolaitan Church as their only church. And obviously, because this is a church that serves people all over the world, and we only have one location right here in Atlanta, that means that it would be impossible for them to be able to make every liturgy in person to receive the Eucharist. So in this sense, they take on a special, almost Desert Father type of grace, because the Desert Fathers weren't able to go and receive communion every week because of their particular type of ministerial vocational calling. So there was there's special conditions upon which things can be dealt with, but that's part of the reason why I live stream the liturgy. Is not that it's a replacement for coming in person. I mean, because you can't receive the Eucharist, over online. You can take a spiritual communion. It does not replace an actual physical one. It's not sacramental, but it's still at least an effort to complete the requirement of attending Mass. So for Nicolaitans who have no other church, we have given a general dispensation that if as long as you attend the live feed, you have met your weekly commitment. If you miss that, well, that would be the equivalent of just not going to your local parish. Okay, it's the same thing. And yes, that would be something that requires a confession to reconcile back to the church.
Dispensations are very common.
Yeah.
This is why, in the Orthodox tradition, any question is ask your priest, right? And it's it's like a meme, it's like a joke, but it's true. The priest is essentially the ultimate authority on your spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And so can give, and in my experience, dispensations, I don't recall any being no. It's about that, because you're maintaining the relationship. So going back to the parable, it's like, it's not just not turning up.
The only time I've seen no is when someone asks for some ridiculous, like I have to attend my child's friend's birthday party, so I can't be there. I don't give dispensations for that kind of reason. No. And I've never known a priest that did. It has to be something that's reasonable.
During COVID, and I know we all have our opinions on that. And I'm ashamed of what most of the church did. But the bishops, because bishops do outrank priests, the bishops did give a general dispensation. Now, it's true to say if it was Ebola, then that would be quite correct. You're not supposed to go to Mass and die.
Right.
It just so happened that they were duped by liars and politicians, but I but that's a tautology. So so they were wrong in the substance of it. But if you think about the general principle of, if there is a global pandemic, there's a threat to. I'm sure during the Spanish flu which was a real pandemic that killed people, I'm sure the Spanish Catholic Church gave a general dispensation from attending mass. I'm almost positive.
Yeah, there's reasons where you can, and there's reasons why you should, and then there's reasons why you shouldn't. It's not to be taken advantage of, and it's certainly not to be given, willy-nilly just because, people don't have the ability to show up. You have to have discernment there. There is a question kind of related to the last one, so I wanted to take this before we get to the next one here. It was from the Village Blacksmith 84 on Instagram. They said, I heard that you have to be confirmed in the Catholic Church before you can take of the elements. Now, by elements, I'm assuming you mean the sacraments. Now, that's not true. You have to be baptized, and if you want to partake of the first communion, if you want to take part of in communion, whether it be your first or otherwise, you need to be in communion with the church, which would mean that for a Roman Catholic, they would want you, if you're not already Catholic. If you are Catholic and baptized, then you can just go to any Catholic church and receive anywhere in the world. It does not matter. But if you're not Catholic, they want you to go through what they call the RCIA program. It's the Rite of Christian Initiation of Adults, to be catechized through the conversion process, and then you would receive your first communion at the Easter Vigil of the next following year. That's the way they do it. But confirmation is not a requirement for receiving any of the sacraments. It is. Let me take that back. It is a requirement for receiving holy orders. It is not a requirement, and I think it is also for matrimony in the Catholic Church, but nothing else. You can receive unction.
But even with holy orders, there's a general backstop that if it turned out that an ordinand had not been confirmed,
it wouldn't invalidate the orders. That's
The ordination is a confirmation as well. So
in a way, yeah. But typically they will get that. They're not going to do that unless they have your confirmation certificate, and if they don't have the
what this person's put their finger on is what you said earlier, which is that originally these sacraments were not separate. Baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist are the initiation rites of the church. And in the Eastern Catholic churches and in the Orthodox churches, they're still all done at the same time with whatever point someone's brought to the church, whether they're an infant or whether you're 100 years old. And the truth is, in the contemporary Western church today, if an adult comes to us who wants to become a Christian, they would all be done at the same time now.
Yeah.
We wouldn't say, "Oh, we're going to baptize you now, and then we'll confirm. Come back in 12 years, and we'll confirm."
No, they wouldn't do
that. And in many ways, you put your finger on something which is a bit of an issue, which is it's very hard to develop a theology of confirmation as is practiced in the West. Like the only thing we can say is, "Oh, well, it's an opportunity for you to make your own." Commitment to the faith at the age of reason, which is what you said, and that's kind of how it ended up where it is. Now that's good in an educational sense, but in a sacramental sense, it really doesn't make any sense.
No, because that would be saying that if you needed to have consent or reach the age of reason to be able to receive baptism or any of these sacraments, well, then that's meaning that the sacramental power is in you, not in God.
Exactly.
And that's
I'm
not how we see it.
Even though I practice it this way because I'm a Western Christian, I'm deeply dubious of the whole from the sort of joke within certain circles of the church is. It's just to give bishops something to do.
We have enough to do. Thank you very much. We certainly don't need to be looking for more work. All right, April, what's our next one?
So the next question is, why do Catholics believe in 7 sacraments when most Christians only recognize 2?
Well, that's an easy one.
Sorry, most Christians recognize 7, just so you know. The numbers in the world outside of America there's an awful lot more Catholics and Orthodox people than there are Protestants.
That is true. So most denominations don't recognize too, but most Christians, because as Father Chris said, the greater majority of Christians are made up of Catholics and Orthodox, then most Christians actually do recognize all seven. But most denominations do not recognize all seven. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But let's just answer it the way the question was asked. Why do Catholics believe in seven sacraments? Well, because Christ instituted seven distinct efficacious signs of grace within Scripture. Okay, and that's baptism, confirmation, Eucharist, penance, or confession, anointing of the sick or unction, holy orders, and matrimony. Okay, each represents a different stage of the Christian life, a different way in which we experience God through the Christian life. Reformers retained typically, and I think that's what they're getting at here, only baptism and Eucharist. First of all, only as symbolic ordinances, not as actual expressions of grace. Because the church, the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church recognize that these are actions of sanctifying grace and necessary at that, then they couldn't be so easily dispensed with if it became inconvenient. Okay, so
in fairness, Lutherans and Anglicans did as well.
They did,
because there's a spectrum, right?
There is, Not all Protestants threw them all away. That's true. But let me give you, I don't want to spend too much time on this because this could almost be a show in itself, but let me give you some of the references for you diehard, Protestant Bible thumpers that say, oh, no, it's not in there. Yes, it is. Okay. And I'm going to give you the verses. So baptism is predominantly made up of, there's so many places where baptism's there. I don't think anybody needs really verses on this, but our primary ones would be Matthew 28:19, where he commands to baptize all nations. Christ does. John 3:5, being born of water and the Spirit. Acts 2:38, baptism for the forgiveness of sins. Okay. Now confirmation. A lot of people say, there's no confirmation in the Bible. Yes, there is. Acts 8:14-17, the laying on of hands to receive the Holy Spirit. Guess what? That's confirmation. That's exactly what that is. Okay. Acts 19:5-6, the Spirit is given through the apostolic laying on of hands. So we see this in numerous places. Hebrews 6:2, the laying on of hands again. Okay. That's just 3 examples of it. It's all over. And that's what we're talking about when we say confirmation. Now you might say, well, they didn't call it confirmation. Well, okay. So they didn't call it confirmation. That's what we call it now, but it's that action that we're talking about. Okay. So it's not like we made up something new. We're talking about the laying on of hands to receive the Holy Spirit.
That's a Latin word.
What's that?
They didn't call them sacraments either, because that's the Latin word.
It's true,
Sacramentum, the regimental pin of a soldier.
Yeah.
They called them, in Greek, mysterion, right?
Mysteries. Yeah, the mysteries.
In Hebrew, I don't know what they called them. In Aramaic, I don't know, because I don't know Aramaic. But but language is a completely irrelevant or a far less relevant factor in this. Is what they actually did, and what we're doing is what they did.
Yeah, that's true. Now for Eucharist, you got Matthew 26:26-28. This is my body, this is my blood. And that's one of the most, obvious. John 6:51, the bread of life discourse. Read it. 1 Corinthians 11:23-29, institution and worthy reception. We talked about that just a few minutes ago. So these are big points. There's many other. There's even Jesus talking about, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you will have no life in you. He's not being symbolic there. When you look at the original Greek, it's right there. So that bread of life discourse is perhaps the most important one. Now, penance. Okay, here's the big one, because people are like, I don't need to confess my sins to some guy. I can just go to God directly. But that's not what Christ told you to do. So you made up your own rules there. John 20:22-23. The authority to forgive sins was given to men. He gives it to his apostles, right? And then the apostles pass that on apostolically to their followers, and so on and so forth, all the way down to people like me. Okay. Matthew Matthew chapter 16, verse 19, the power to bind and loose sins. Okay. He gives that to the church. He literally gives that to the church. Whatever you forgive is forgiven. Whatever you bind is bound. Okay. James 5:16. it even tells you specifically to confess sins to one another, because guess what? You can't hurt God. Your sins do not harm God in the slightest. They don't hurt his feelings, and they don't make him angry. It doesn't lead to any kind of harm. You can't take away or subtract from God's greatness. Nothing you do, no sin you commit can remove God's greatness. But you know what does get hurt when you sin? The rest of us, everybody else is participates in the harm and consequences of the sins you commit. So therefore, your sin is really against the church, not against God. God just wants the church to be unified with him. And so in order to do that, we all have to be perfect. So if one of us is not perfect, well, that means the whole church is going to suffer now, because we can't be in perfect communion with God if we're going to be imperfect amongst ourselves. That's why confession is important, and why it is necessary to confess to the church, not directly to God, because God's not the one that's upset, okay? The church is the one that has to be reconciled to. Again, Protestants don't understand that little caveat there. It's very important to understand what the theology is really saying. Now, the anointing of the sick is pretty simple, okay? I don't think any Protestant has ever argued this one. But in case you do, James 5, chapter 5, verses 14 through 15, anointing of the oil by the presbyters. Mark 6:13, the apostles are anointed the sick. All right, that's what that is. We call it unction. They didn't. Doesn't matter. These are Latin terms. They didn't use Latin like Father Chris said. They spoke Aramaic. Holy orders, okay? Luke chapter 22, verse 19. Do this in remembrance of me. Well, you know, there's a chain of action that takes place apostolically from that. He tells the apostles what they need to do. They told their followers what they needed to do. Those followers pass it on. That's called apostolic succession. We've continued that tradition. 1 Timothy 4:14, the gift is of grace is given through the laying on of hands again. But this is not to receive the Holy Spirit. This is to be empowered, okay? Titus 1:5, there's an anointment of the presbyters. There's other places where that matters, but again, I don't want to get into all these. I just want to get these out there so you can stop, go back and watch this on the recording, and then stop and then write these down. Matrimony is the last one. I mean, this goes back to the Jewish faith, okay? There was obviously, marriage has been a part of the Judeo-Christian world for a long time. But you got Genesis chapter 2:24, one flesh union, okay? The two become one flesh, all right? Matthew 19:6, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder, okay? Ephesians 5:31-32, marriage as a sign of Christ in the church. Because why do you get married? It isn't because you fell in love and you want to, be right in God's eyes. I know that's how they want to bill it, but that's not what it's about. Matrimony is about coming together, man and woman, to represent Christ in his church, to have that union amongst ourselves intimately that can only be achieved in that sort of intimacy that the sexual union produces. And that sexual union produces new life, which is exactly what God does. He's a life giver. So matrimony brings life into the world. It isn't about falling in love. This is why, again, I don't want to get into it unless you guys want me to, but homosexual marriage is not something that can ever be sacramentally conferred, because in order for the sacrament to take place, it has to be able to produce new life. It's not about falling in love. It's about creating new life through that union of Christ with his church. Okay, these are the things, again, it's theological. People just take it for granted. They don't understand the depth of it because they've never really heard it maybe taught this way, or they've never really looked to try to find it. The information's out there, though. You can go to any bookstore and find it. But those are the verses. For those of you who think that Christ didn't institute 7 sacraments, there you go. There they are. Any other ones you can think of, Father? What's that?
There are more.
There's so many more. So many more.
I know we're at the top of the hour, but just quickly, in terms of marriage, of course, Jesus is asked about the question about the woman that's had 7 husbands. He reiterates, he restates what's said in Genesis. So there you go. In terms of confession, there's also, I love the apophatic tradition. The apophatic looks at what's not that, the negative. It's like looking at a negative instead of the photograph. And in Matthew 5, I think it is Matthew 5, he talks about, the sin against the Holy Spirit, the sin that cannot be forgiven, either in this life or in the life to come. The apophatic tradition tells you, therefore, there are sins that can be forgiven in this life. And then that's glued together with John 20, as you said, which is both ordination and sacramental confession in one, which is exactly the context of the priesthood and the episcopacy.
Well said. Okay, so I think this is probably a good place to stop for our first break. Coming to the top of the hour here. Getting good questions from the audience. Thank you so much for that. Please don't go anywhere. We've got so many more questions to answer for you. We're going to just take our break here. Be back in about 5-10 minutes. Just sit, enjoy the music, and the questions will continue when we return. Don't go anywhere.
like a hurricane to my heart, to far away. See the lights on the other side. I'm going to get there and hope we will meet there. Day has passed like a hurricane to my heart, to far away. See the lights on the other side. I'm going to get there and hope we will meet there.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. We have been discussing Catholicism tonight and answering primary questions that a lot of people have. These are like top questions about Catholic theology and the weird, quirky things that Catholics seem to do. If you're an outsider from the Catholic Church, it might seem very weird to you, actually. You know, they're just ancient. That's all it is. And we're kind of explaining to you how it works, okay? That's what's going to continue here over the next 2 hours, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Okay, April, what's our next question?
Our next question is, why can't Catholic priests marry?
All right, this is a good one. I like this one. Okay, so clerical celibacy, let's make this clear first, is a discipline. It is not dogma, okay? There is no theological absolute requirement of this. It is a discipline that is practiced, okay? As case in point, Eastern Catholic, well, not so much Eastern Catholic, but they can, but Orthodox priests are usually married, actually encouraged to be so. So Matthew chapter 19:12 is though what the Catholic Church tends to use as being chosen for the sake of the kingdom. And so the idea in Roman Catholicism is that celibacy is an expression of total devotion to Jesus Christ so that they can be undivided in their attention towards the service of the church, okay? And while Eastern churches, even Eastern Catholic churches do to a certain extent, although it's very difficult, allow married priests. This is not common in the Western church, okay? But it's an ecclesial rule, not a doctrinal rule. And another reason is celibacy imitates Christ's own life as the church teaches it, that Christ himself was celibate, and so therefore priests, being representatives of Christ and in persona Christi, can more perfectly do this in this sense. Now, that's the reason, okay? And I guess you could say there's valid reasons there, because I will say a person that has no family is going to be less divided in attention, so that's true. But I do think there are other deficits, and let me explain to you some of them. And in the Nicolean Church, we do not have any clerical celibacy of any kind. It's not a requirement, even for bishops. Even in the Orthodox Church, the bishops are typically taken from the monasteries, and monastics are celibate, even in the Eastern Church. But in the Nicolean Church and most of the independent sacramental movement, you're not going to find really any celibacy there that's necessary or enforced in any way. Now, one of the reasons that we don't do this is because we feel that a priest should be able to relate to the people he serves. It's really kind of hard for a celibate person who's never had a sex life or never had any, regular intimacy, having to deal with the demands that come with maintaining a marriage, raising children, the things that normal people do. If your priest hasn't done them, he's not going to be able to really relate to you in the same way that he could if he did do them. So in my experience, I'd say Orthodox priests are far better at dealing with the normal family issues in pastoral life than Roman Catholics are, or Roman Catholic priests, because they don't have that barrier there. And I mean, even scripture says that bishop should be the husband, to one wife, I mean, it even states this, that they should be. So there's really, even, I would say theologically, more support that clergy should be married. I think that's how God intended it, but there were reasons for why that changed. Now, one of the reasons, perhaps the primary reason, okay, was in feudal times, okay, laws were very different than the ones that we enjoy today. And so it was very common that when a priest would set up a parish in a medieval town somewhere, that he would basically be the owner of that property, okay? Now, it would be understood that he'd pass that property down to his successor. And, that would be just this continuous line so the parish could continue, and people that enjoyed that parish could continue to go with whatever priest took over after his death. The problem was there were some really greedy wives that some of these priests had, and they took all the property. And so in order to avoid this becoming a prolific problem, which it was in these times, the church eventually enforced celibacy to keep these greedy wives from taking all the church property away and then having to leave these parishes empty or defunct after the pastor died. That's one of the, I think, the more practical reasons for how it happened, and it just continued on because that's not an issue today. Laws can be written differently. We got different corporation arrangements legally that can be set up to protect against that sort of thing. So there's no reason for it today. So now the church says, well, it's to be like Jesus. Okay, I can see where there's some value to that, but I can see more value being able to relate to your parish. Now, Father Chris might have a completely different opinion on this, but I don't think so. I don't know, Father. What do you think about it?
I don't think I do. But I want to start with Scripture. So
All right.
This is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verse 29. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew. Simon would be St. Peter.
Yeah.
With James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it would be a cruel God that would give you a mother-in-law and not a wife. And so St. Peter was certainly married.
I think that's the Father Chrisism for tonight. I think.
Yeah, that's gonna be clipped on TikTok, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's definitely gonna make a TikTok video. I think.
So the first pope of the church was definitely married. It says so in the Gospel of Mark. Okay, and by the way, I'm with the scholars that believe that the Gospel of Mark are the teachings of St. Peter, written down by Marcus. But anyway, that's another story. So what we do know is that bishops and priests and deacons were married for at least the first 4 centuries of the life of the church. There's a really good talk. I mention him on every show. It's because he's a hero, by the late Callistos Ware, who was an Englishman but a Greek Orthodox bishop. And he's seen as dangerously liberal by the Orthodox, which means he wasn't liberal at all. But he was talking about, he could see. He was trying to say we should have a discussion again about married bishops, but he said that what we do know is that by the fourth century, the church had stopped ordaining married men as bishops. And now the Orthodox approach is to be cautious about changing things that have, their approach is this must have happened for a reason, even if we don't know what the reason was. And so we should be cautious about going back. But he was, as an Orthodox bishop, even talking about revisiting married bishops, because he saw great priests that were married that would make good bishops. So we know that for the first 4 centuries of the church, we had married bishops. Then that ceased. Now, as an aside, I think there's a good social and practical reason to continue this. And again, I'm not saying this is a point of doctrine or dogma, because I agree with you, there's none on this. There can't be. St. Peter had a wife.
Right, the apostles were married, most of them were.
So it makes no statement on anything to do with that. But managerialism is a problem in the church. And I've been in churches that had married bishops and a church that doesn't. And I think that there is some virtue in picking bishops from monasteries. That's all I can say.
I agree.
Because it doesn't prevent it altogether. I mean, there are men that will go into the monastery because they want to be a bishop, right? The human nature is human nature. But it does mitigate it, because that's, in a sense, if that's your hack, I know I'm going to break the system by becoming a monk, and then I'll end up a bishop, then even if that's your, even if you've got a kind of devious intention, the fact that you've had to be a monk for 10 years is probably going to do you some good, and probably mitigate you being even worse. So I think there's some value in that. I think the Orthodox have got a good balance, but the Orthodox are pretty insistent. If you're going to be a parish priest, then you have to be married, really.
I think
really
you should.
I mean, obviously, people's wives die or they leave them, but really most parish priests are married in the Orthodox Church for that reason. And if you're not going to be a married priest, then you're going to be a hieromonk. You're going to be a priest monk.
Well, it makes sense too, because the Eastern Church, the Byzantine Empire wasn't feudal. It didn't have feudal law. And so it operated more administratively. And so therefore it was more conducive to eliminating the problems that feudalism presented to these married clergy.
And it was the 12th century that married clergy was really ended in the West. And look, this is part of a bigger historical development that happened in the West, which actually has not been a bad thing, which was to try and, well, it did break the clan system. So if you look at the worst cultures in the world, the worst countries today, they exist on clan systems. Like that's why they have cousin marriage and all. It's kind of trying to secure your tribe against other tribes, and so these nations constantly war. At the moment, like the easiest expression are Middle Eastern countries, but it's not because of the Islam. It's because of the clan system, and the two things have been enmeshed. Well, we had a clan system in the West as well, but it was broken very early on. It was broken 1,000 years ago, and this was all part of that. So. Because like you've said, the issue was property rights and as it happens, my last church in the Church of England, I was the vicar of, for the first, I think, 60 years of that church, it was a father and a son. The father was the rector, then the son was the next one. And in fact, the grandfather had built the church, right? So it was sort of like a resurrection of pre-medieval ecclesiology that happened in the 19th century. So, but we could all see where that can go wrong, and so it was part of breaking the wider clan system in the West. It's no mistake that it coincided roughly with the Norman invasion of England, and so you get this shift really from these are anachronisms, but from a more orthodox approach to a more Roman approach. But a historian or a theologian will be screaming at the screen now saying, "Oh, you can't use those terms in that context." I know, this is just shorthand.
Because Brandon just keeps us. Brandon gives you too many questions. So if anybody has a problem,
in trouble.
He does. We have to get through them, we got to get through them. So we have to give him easier answers. Okay. All right, April, what's the next one? Kind of relates to the last one.
Yeah. The next one says, why do nuns and monks take vows of celibacy?
Okay. So this is an interesting one.
Because they want to.
Yeah, it's because they want to. See, remember, understand.
People actually have different ideas than you.
Understand that in monasticism, okay, religious life, which is a different vocation than like diocesan priesthood, which you're going to see most of the priests that you interact with, the bishops that run your diocese, and all the deacons that might be in your home. Deacons, you have transitional diaconate, but you also have like the permanent diaconate, which they can be married, right? They would be in usually just ordinary people at home with jobs, okay? But monks and nuns are monastics, and that religious life is a different vocation, and they are required to take a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Diocesan priests and bishops do not take vows of poverty. They do take vows of obedience and chastity, but they do not take a vow of poverty like they do in the monastery. This follows Christ's advice on how to arrive at perfection. Matthew chapter 19, if you're interested, covers a lot of this. Celibacy signifies the eschatological union with God, and that is, I think, really what this is about. Because when you go to become a monk or a nun, you are basically marrying yourself to Christ. Okay, so that becomes the intimacy, that becomes the commitment. You're leaving behind secular existence. It's not to reject the sacrament of matrimony. It's a sacrament. It's a grace. All right, you're not rejecting it. It's to experience divine love differently. perhaps more deliberately, one might argue, and so the triple vows help one to do that. So obedience, which again all clergy and monks and nuns take a vow of obedience, is to keep you in in under the structure of Christ's love. It's kind of almost a checks and balances kind of system, because you have to have structure, and otherwise things fall apart. So you willfully, as Father Chris said, you willfully choose this as a way of sort of giving up your own prerogatives for the needs of the church, to be able to more easily facilitate that. The vow of poverty also does this, because if you're accumulating personal wealth, then you're not able to actually live the requirement of the church is to be able to give all of yourself. And so it creates I think you could say it creates a double standard that is irreconcilable after a certain point. You haven't completely given yourself over if you're still retaining too much of your own self there. Now, diocesan priests and bishops don't take that vow of poverty because they do live in the world. They're not being taken care of by them.
Were monks. Like, so if a Dominican's made a bishop, then they have to be released to their vow of poverty.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
because a bishop has to
well,
the money.
They're the property owners. When a bishop becomes the head of a church or the head of a diocese, it's all in their name. They hold it, and then they release it to whoever comes after them if the Pope relocates them somewhere, whatever.
But also, let's not lose a flip side of this. Marriage is also a vocation.
Yeah, it is, and a different one.
Everyone's called to that, and not everyone's called to that vocation.
Right.
And so, there's this sort of, I think there's some myths that need to be busted here. Priests aren't like, these poor priests who've had celibacy thrust upon them. They've taken a vow voluntarily.
They take a promise. They take a promise of celibacy.
You're right. But regardless. Now the issue is actually, the place where I would, if you're going to have a line of attack, is to say, why should married men be prevented from that choice? They're the ones you should feel sorry for.
Yeah,
men who are called to the priesthood.
Right, because now you're punished. You're punished if you're called to both.
So celibacy is a choice.
Yeah.
Now, but the other myth, and a vocation. Marriage is also a vocation, and but the other thing that needs to be busted about that is that not everyone ends up in marriage. Marriage isn't for everybody, and just because you're not called to marriage doesn't mean you should go and then be a monk or a nun. There's lots of vocations in life, and the problem is when we have this idealized version, either or the perfect celibate priest, or the perfect married man, or these images of perfection in your mind are really destructive to you. Yeah. And sometimes you might want to be married and it just doesn't work out for you in life. Now, that's not because you're being punished or because God's forsaken you. It's just that vocation wasn't for you. And there's loads of other vocations you can have in life. And so, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but it really, I think it's really damaging and harmful. And the church has on occasion been part of the harm of this, of saying, well, either you're going to be a monk or a nun or a priest, or you're going to be married. Well, actually, there are people that most people in the world don't fall into either of those categories.
Yeah.
So,
single life is a vocation too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes, you might want to be married, but maybe you're not good for marriage,
I mean, that's possible. I mean, it is possible. I mean, there's a lot of people that become priests and they're not good for priesthood.
Yeah.
yeah, true.
Yeah. I mean, it happens, right? That's why discernment is so important. And even discernment can go wrong if you're not on your A game. You might think God's calling you to it, and you might get that wrong if you don't know what you're doing. So the church does have some good safeguards, but a lot of people fall through those cracks and still end up in positions they shouldn't.
That's like any career.
Yeah, just like any job, any career. I mean, it works that way. All right, April, what's our next one?
Why does the church use incense, candles, and Latin? Isn't that ritualistic or ritualism?
Well,
All right,
yeah.
so
What's wrong with ritualism?
these are liturgical signs. Okay, so these things, incense, candles, vestments, and chant, they are expressions of the transcendence that we are to experience in divine worship, to take us out of the ordinary life.
Use of your five senses.
They are all biblical, and it is the five senses. So let's talk about that for a minute. So, people, when you say, are you praying? Well, they think that means that you're uttering words or something, okay? That's the least of all prayer, all right? Oratio is the least of all prayer. The proper prayer is to pray with your entire being, okay? And that makes it possible for you to fulfill St. Paul's command to pray without ceasing. How can you do that if the only prayer you're really recognizing is oratio or oral prayer? So what are the different things that you're calling ritualism are really just expressions of prayer. So incense is a way of praying with your nose, okay? You smell the actual experience. The experience becomes your sense of your olfactory. Yes, and you see it rise up.
So your prayers up to him,
and that's what the icons are for, and the stained glass, and all of the ornate aspects of a church are to pray with your eyes. Okay, when you receive the Eucharist, you're praying with your tongue. You're tasting the grace physically, okay? So all your senses are applied. Chant prays with your ears, with the glorious sound of like Gregorian chant, for example, or any kind of chant, really. It's beautiful, and it expresses the beauty of God's grace. Incense is even more important because it symbolizes the prayer rising to God. That's biblical. Revelation chapter 8, Psalm 141. It's right in there. Now, Latin is a different matter because in the church's interest for unity, as it became larger and the need for unity became more challenging, it was a logical step for Latin, which had been the predominant formal language of the Western world, to be the unifying sacred language of the church. I mean, this was the place it was serving in. I mean, see, Latin was not part of the Eastern Church because Latin wasn't out there. In fact, the Eastern Church always offered liturgy in the vernacular and still does to this day. They use a lot of Greek, but I mean, if you go to like a Melkite church, you're going to hear a lot of Arabic. You'll even hear God called Allah, and that's in a Catholic church, okay? Because the Arabic word for God is Allah. It's not a different God, as a lot of I've heard Christians erroneously say. No, Allah is the
There's
word
only
for
one
God.
God.
Yeah, what's that?
There's only one God anyway.
Only one God anyway. And I mean, all three our Abrahamic religions would agree with that, or at least they should. Mm-hmm. And so these are not empty rituals and ritualism. What they are visible expressions of the inward experience so that we can pray with our entire being, not just with our mouth. And, most of us should keep our mouth shut anyway. If anything gets you in more trouble, it's that. Yeah.
That's all of us.
I mean, look, if there's a body part that you're gonna sin with, a lot of people think it's their sexual organs. No, it's your mouth, because it gets you into more sin than anything else on you could. So the best way to honestly honor God is to shut your mouth and actually use the rest of your senses to pray. And the church helps you do that.
Be still.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that one, Father, that I might have missed?
Yeah, lots of them.
Okay.
So with incense, by the way, I mean, incense has been used by the Israelites and Christians forever, and I love the image of the incense. The only way that incense can give off its fragrance is if it's willing to be burned on the coal. And so we are the grains of incense. That's the whole point.
It's type of Holocaust, isn't it? It's an actual Holocaust.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what. Yeah. So, but there's a really funny, true story of my great heroes were the Tractarians. These were the Church of England priests that were trying to re-emphasize the Catholic nature of the Church of England and really to bring about unity with Rome. and a group of them went to Rome to meet with Pope Leo the 13th. Was it? No, it was Pius. I can't remember which number. Anyway, they're going to meet with the Pope.
Don't ask me. I lost track a long time ago.
Well, and so they go to meet with the Pope, and they have a conversation with him, and then they ask for his blessing, and he gave the blessing that in the old rite you gave over when you put incense in the thurible. May you be blessed by he in whose name thou shalt be burned. So in other words, you were saying you need to convert to the true faith or you're going to hell. But anyway, that's an aside. But this image that in order for our lives to be fragrant to God, we've got to be willing to lay them down, right? What could be a better Christian image than that? So now in terms of ritual, because I kind of came to Catholicism from having been a Baptist, I've heard every single argument about this. Oh, ritualism. Well, the word ritual is connected to the word river in Latin, and it means being taken from one point to another. So ritual's a really good thing. And any Protestant that tells me they don't believe in ritual, they don't have ritual, well, I can tell you the Baptist churches I used to attend, the ritual was you came in, normally a little bit late, and you sang 8 songs, and every time you sang a song, then you had to repeat the chorus at least 2 or 3 times. That was the ritual. And then at some point you'd sit down and somebody would read like one sentence from the Bible and then give a 45-minute homily of their own opinions on that. And then after that you'd sing a load more songs, and then you'd have some terrible coffee afterwards. That's a ritual.
and maybe some Oreos.
It's just it's just a different sort of ritual,
Yeah.
But the rituals that the Catholic Church practices are ones that are biblical and have been around for a long time. They didn't have drum kits and electric guitars, and so but they did have incense and they had candles and that sort of thing.
Well, look at the Book of Revelation; it's full of ritual. I mean,
the Book of Revelation is the Mass.
Yeah,
that's what
it is the Mass.
It's describing the Mass.
Yeah.
Or
you could say it the other way around. I mean, if you want to say why do Catholics have all this stuff, you could say the Mass is reflecting the Book of Revelation. And Protestants love the Book of Revelation, so you think they'd like the Mass.
They don't understand it.
They don't understand it.
Yeah. The rituals of the church are ones that have survived for thousands of years, and they've probably survived for reasons. Now, this isn't to say, I probably am against drum kits anywhere near a church, full stop, but that's because I prefer Wagner to contemporary music. So I've just got, that's my own taste. But I think there is something transcendent about Gregorian chant, about Slavonic polyphony, about Byzantine chant. There's something that is something that's about in the human voice, and the organ, which is kind of tolerated. Organs were banned from churches for a very long time. Organs are tolerated because they do sort of imitate the human voice, and so I can just about cope with that. But anything that's too jarringly foreign to the human voice really should be. I don't think it adds to the ritual.
I think I could be wrong on this, but I think it was because a lot of the great, what became the great liturgical composers were actually Protestants, and they were having too much fun. So the Catholics you're gonna bring some of that music in here.
Oh yeah, and by the way, some of the greatest hymns ever written are definitely from the Protestant.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Bach. I mean, Bach was a Protestant, right? I mean, he wrote some of the best. In fact, we're gonna listen to this. I got a Bach arrangement coming up here, so you're gonna enjoy that.
But I do want to just briefly speak to the Latin part, because this is actually. In recent times, like in the last year or last 2 years, it's really dawned on me. What I'm going to say, everyone's going to go, "Oh, I knew that," but actually, it was new to me. And so, it's that for a long time I sort of dabbled with orthodoxy, because I love orthodoxy, and I know you do as well. But whenever you dabble with that, you have to confront the question, well, am I going to be Greek or Russian or Serbian or Romanian or...
it's always the ethnic aspect that takes a lot out of it for me, unfortunately.
And it does. And by the way, it's also what protects it. It's a dichotomy, a lot of what is great about orthodoxy is also what makes it impenetrable for people who are outside of it. And Orthodox Americans listening, you actually have the OCA. Anyway, look, I'm being very, very pro-Orthodox in what I'm about to say, but it made me think, and this is what dawned on me in the last couple of years. If only there were a church whose patriarch lived in a country that wasn't really a country. Oh, the Holy
that sounds
See.
familiar.
And if only there were a language that we could use in the church that's not really anyone's language.
Yeah.
Oh, Latin. And so now I'm not. This doesn't mean that everyone's got to go and speak Latin in church. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that perhaps our blessed Lord and the Holy Spirit have had some wisdom in guiding the church to lead it to a place where we have a non-national church, because then it doesn't belong to any nation, to any language, to any tongue. Nobody today speaks Latin. I mean, Latin was never a national language because it was spoken in the entire Roman Empire, right? It's like me. I mean, I know I'm English, but really, for the English to say you're speaking my language, we know English has become, a ubiquitous language used by many countries across the world. But and Latin had the same kind of place. And so Hamush is thanking me for mentioning the Romanian Orthodox. I love the Romanian Orthodox Church, by the way. One of my best friends is a Romanian Orthodox priest. But all I'm saying is that Latin has this status of being the language of the church now. It was the language of the Roman Empire, but it became the language of the church. And it also has the advantage of, because it's a dead language, it doesn't change its meaning. So when we say prayers in Latin, they don't change what they mean. So when we say Dominus vobiscum, it can only mean the Lord Jesus be with you. Whereas if in English I say the Lord be with you, we're like, well, what? Lord Haw, somebody in the House of Lords. Latin it becomes a very specific language of Christianity. So now that's notwithstanding the complaints that the reformers had of, although I don't really agree with all of it. People didn't know what they were saying. Nonsense. If people have been brought up going to church on holy days of obligation, which includes every Sunday, then I'm not buying that they didn't know what was going on in the mass. I don't believe that.
Well, they probably know what's going on. I think there were problems though with the readings were also in Latin, and I mean, unless you were fluent, you probably were missing a lot of it. No,
but I'm afraid I'm a bit of a traddy. I think that, and this is why I'm not a Protestant, right? I think the opening up. Yes, is it a good thing that you can read the scriptures in your own language? Sort of. Because you're not you're reading a translation of something which is not, to translate is to murder. But also, it's why we end up with 11,000 Protestant denominations, because as soon as you remove, there's two extremes. One is to say only the church can teach you what this Bible means, and very specifically. But the other extreme is you can read it and run away with it, which is why we've just talked about the Book of Revelation is completely misunderstood by a great number of those denominations.
Well, it was the result of the fact that, just as it is today,
Christian Zionism,
just as it is today, it's education was a practice of the of the wealthy, and in order to be able to learn to become fluent in Latin required an extensive amount of education that the average person in the medieval times could not even hope to be able to do. I mean, you're spending 15 hours out in the fields, right? What's that?
But understanding what the scriptures mean also requires a degree of education and understanding.
Well, that's true.
Not for you to read it and get a personal benefit from, but for you to then say, "Oh, God is teaching this to the whole world."
Well, the problem is that it's when you start taking personal perspectives and then making that authoritative because you think you can.
Got 11,000 Protestant churches.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where it is a problem.
That's the inevitable. And that's not been a good thing. The fact that we have all these denominations,
but yet,
is a sin.
But the fact is, the Greek world kept it in the vernacular, and they didn't have that problem. So it definitely,
well,
I think,
Keeney Greek is not modern Greek, but I understand what you're saying.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you know, they didn't. It wasn't the same thing where the educated language and only the educated were speaking it. You know, the dead language of Latin. I think there was a lot going on. The printing press, I think, had more to do with it than even the vernacular, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, when you started giving it to everybody, then they can ruminate at home and be like, "Oh, I think this means that now," and then now you got like a whole other denomination.
I mean, there were English versions of the scriptures in England. Before the King James version, there were. But when it was mass produced,
that's when it changed. And it was around that same time. All right, what's our next one?
Our next question is, why is there so much hierarchy in the church?
All right, so this is
where isn't there hierarchy?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be my first question too. You know, where in structure requires hierarchy, and hierarchy also reflects the consistency of structure and integrity. So, for example, the apostles, were set up even in Scripture. Ephesians chapter 4. Where you can definitely see the line of bishops, priests, and deacons as a structural system where every specific duty would be carried out by those in that particular office. So it's just like a school, for example. I mean, you got teachers that teach English, you got teachers that teach math. Math teachers might not be teaching English. They probably wouldn't be good at it. And English teachers probably wouldn't be good at teaching math. So you could call that a hierarchy. I mean, in the sense that, but you still have to have structure in order to govern the consistency and integrity and hold it together. So why would you not? I guess my next question would be, why would you not want that? Because it doesn't exist as a means of imposition. It's not a privilege that you're bestowing upon someone. I mean, to elevate someone to bishop, for example, is not granting him an honor. It's an office that he's taken on, a burden that he takes on in the name of service. And that hierarchical structure is there to safeguard things like unity, the consistency of the apostolic teaching, and the sacramental life of the church, so that people just don't go off and do whatever the hell they want to. There has to be somebody that checks and balances. So it's just like the United States government, for example. You got the Senate, you got the House of Representatives, you got the executive branch, the judicial branch. All of this is structure. Now, it doesn't always work very well, and it certainly doesn't work very well now, but, in its purest form, it's there to keep the system functional. And therefore, everyone has a role, everyone has a responsibility within that structure, and that is what holds it together. But if people just doing whatever the hell they want, then it's not going to last. We would not have, let me put it this way, we would not have Christianity. We would not even know what it is today if it weren't for hierarchy and structure. It would have disappeared. Kind of like paganism. Disappeared. Even say, oh no, Bishop, the neo-pagans are still out there practicing. They're restructurists. They're reconstructionists is what they are. That they're not. Nobody knows what the pagans practice.
And it's an impossible task. I mean, you can't. I mean.
Look at
Aboriginal stuff here as well.
Look at what some of them have done. They've just emulated the mass and refocused it around their own deities and everything. Is what I've seen. So the fact is,
and they probably have 11,000 denominations too.
I mean, they do. They do. You got the Druids and everything. Yep. But I mean, nobody has a direct lineage to any of these religions because there was no hierarchy to hold it together. No structure to keep it together. And even all these, 11,000, there's actually probably closer to 33,000 denominations of Christianity.
Yeah.
That's because there's no structure to them. Isn't it interesting, though, that even though the Roman Catholic Church has had its schisms, You know, we've had our schisms, you know, over the years, different heretical sects that would break off and do different things. Overall, though, over its 2,000-year history, it's pretty much held itself together. Orthodoxy, the same. Even though it has different ethnic branches and different rites within those branches, they still have held it together because of the structure. But look at you know, Father, you're talking about the Anglican Church, okay? I think that thing is falling apart because there's just
finished.
No one knows what they're doing. It's finished.
Well, it's because ironically, because they no longer have a hierarchy.
Yeah, that's right.
The word hierarchy is taken from the word hieros, right? Which is Greek for priest.
Yeah.
And so it's the rule of priests.
Yeah.
Now, when you fool yourself into thinking that women are priests and bishops, they're not. I'm sorry. I know there's, you know, you can all clutch your pearls that disagree with me, but they're just not. They're not priests. So you've lost your hierarchy. And so but let's go back to the source. Why is the church a hierarchy? Matthew 16:18. And I tell you, this is words of Jesus, and I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. Jesus said this is going to be a hierarchy, as opposed to a monarchy or an autocracy or a democracy. Is going to be a hierarchy. Now, that doesn't mean perfect. Priest doesn't equal perfect. But what it says is it will be the rule of priests. And that's why you've said that if it wasn't, let me tell you now, as terrible as the church may be where you are, I mean the Catholic Church, as managerialism's crept in and money corrupts and all the rest of it, there is no Catholic or Orthodox bishop anywhere in the world saying, well, do you know what, it'd be more profitable if we didn't celebrate Mass on Sunday.
Oh, jeez.
Right? It's the rule of priests. And so however terrible and sinful and corrupt and awful individual bishops, priests, deacons may be in the life of the church, it's almost as though Jesus Christ was really God and really man. It's almost as though the Holy Spirit, in fact, was sent from the Father to govern the church. The rule of priests, which is what hierarchy means, the rule of priests has meant that the fundamental, the bare minimum of what is necessary for God to be worshipped by humanity before the parousia has survived, and it will continue to survive. The rule of priests is what's necessary.
Well, let me ask, people that don't want hierarchy in the church. Okay, so why do you go to a dentist then? Just go to your best friend and have him yank your tooth out. Why don't you have him fill your filling? Why do you need to go to a dentist for? Why? Because you want that guy's skill? Well, there's hierarchy in that. Okay.
Yeah, Google it.
Yeah, exactly. Just Google how to do it, right? I mean, there's reasons for. I mean, what about family life, right? I mean, why don't you just, why does your kid just go make the money and you stay home and go to school? Send your 5-year-old to go bring home the bacon. Let's see how well that goes. Okay, the fact is, hierarchy exists in order to service the body of whatever system the people there are serving. And in the sense of the church, you're serving the church. You're serving the means of salvation for everyone. And
there's actually an esoteric angle to this as well, because and this is supported by the church. Mm-hmm. Within the family, a parent can bless their child.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
They're part of the hierarchy.
They can bless their home too.
Function.
They can bless their home too.
I mean, they're not ministerial priests in the way that an ordained man is,
right? No.
But they perform a priestly function in that, and so and it's what a mother can bless her son unless he's made a priest. Then he must bless her because he now has hierarchical authority over her. But until he's ordained a priest, she has it over him.
Yeah, right.
And so hierarchy is the fundamental building block of. I'm talking in an esoteric way now. Mm-hmm. It's actually what knits together all of humanity, because there's a spiritual authority at play in the world, which is synonymous with hierarchy.
Yeah, well said. Okay, I think we can probably do one more question before the next break. So, April, what do you got for us here?
We've got somebody in the chat who's wanting to hear Jamie's perspective on kind of converting over to Catholicism.
Well, short story, because we don't have time.
Well, take us to the break. Take us to the break with it.
Okay, so I was raised Protestant, was baptized as a baby, confirmed in the Protestant church. It's a Swedish Protestant church in Illinois. Stayed with the church many years until I went off to the military. Then I kind of fell off for a little bit, struggled back and forth, messed around with some shamanism, was Baptist for a few years, and then walked away from the church pretty much altogether. Still considered myself Christian, but kind of like a Ronin, didn't have a church to go to. And then when my motorcycle accident happened and I had my NDE, it was St. Michael that came to get me. And it left me with a lot of questions and a lot of wondering, what did I miss growing up? Because I had enjoyed going to Catholic Mass with my grandparents when I was younger. I didn't understand a lot of it, but I always remembered it was beautiful and it just felt right. So a few years after my accident, I'm recovering and everything, and I'm just trying to find out, why am I still here? Why did that happen to me? The things that I experienced during my NDE. And I also wanted to try to become an investigator to get some answers for myself as well. And I just so happened to find the bishop on the internet. First, it was the Order of Exorcists, and I looked through that and found that they had a chapter in Atlanta, but I never reached out. And then a year later, I was really prompted to reach out, and I did, and I got a response. And next thing you know, I'm interviewing just to join the resolution team, or at the time it was the paranormal investigative team. And I ended up staying for Mass one night and thoroughly enjoyed it. When it came to Eucharist, I didn't plan on going up, and then I was invited to come up with the open communion, and I thought that was beautiful, and something just clicked in me. And the rest is history. So in Easter Vigil of 2017, I became a Nicolaitan Catholic, and have no plans on going anywhere else. Because the plethora of information and clarity that I've gotten in the last 10 years is just hands down. It answered so many questions I had as a Protestant that no pastor could answer. And I like I've said before, I'm very happy that my parents brought me up in the Protestant church because it led me to God. But I'm also very thankful that I found this church because all the information is here, and I'll spend the rest of my life just trying to soak it up, because that's why I'm not saying anything tonight. I'm sitting here, I'm a student just like y'all tonight. I'm just sitting here soaking this all up. So the conversion was something that I needed to do, and I think God was prodding me to come this way for several years, and I finally took a shot at it, and the rest is history. So,
yeah, I mean, and we've had an interesting time ever since. Huh?
We have.
All right, we're going to take our next break here. When we come back, we will continue on with more questions that we have compiled on understanding Catholicism. Okay, there's so many of them. We're going to need a part 3, but we'll get through as many as we can here, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We are still answering questions on Catholicism. We will not finish all of these tonight. I don't think so. Might have to do... We actually have some open episodes this season. We might be able to throw in part 3. I'll take a look at it. Might be a good thing to do. See where that takes us, rather than wait till next season in the fall to do it. But we're going to continue to get through as many of these as we can, push them out. Father Chris and I like to talk, so only so much you can do. But I think when I did this, it was like we could only spend 2 or 3 minutes on each one to get through all of them, and that's not going to happen. So anyway, we'll keep going, and we'll go as far as we can. We'll do a part 3, so don't go anywhere. Okay, April, what's our next question?
We have a question in the chat that relates to one of the questions a little bit farther down. Do you want to take it out of order, or what do you want to do?
Well, how far down is it? Will we be able to get to it?
I don't know. It's about 7 questions down.
Well, it depends how quickly we get. It might be pushing it. Yeah. Let's go ahead and answer it, and then if we do get to it, we'll just move beyond it. And if it ends up showing up on the next episode, well, we'll just try to remember that and cover it briefly again, I guess.
Okay. So you'll need to tell you what the question was that was in the chat.
Yeah. What's the question?
Okay. It comes from Mason, and he is asking, how does the Catholic Church train exorcists, and how do exorcists discern between true demonic possession versus psychological health issues?
Well, the training, there's a formal training that the Vatican gives. Many of them, if not all of them, go and attend this. But a large part of the field work and training that goes into being an exorcist is ideally done through mentorship. That's how we operate in the Nicolaitan Church, is through a mentorship program, because there really is no substitute for being in the field with a more experienced individual, and then learning directly off of that experience how to do it yourself, because no classroom can ever really prepare you for all of the variables that you'll see, which is true for most activities, not just exorcism. Now, as far as how you discern the difference, the issue really comes down to, you always take the simplest explanation first and then work your way through a process of elimination. So the first thing that you always do is assume that there's some kind of physiological thing that is going on. Is there some kind of neurological problem, something environmental happening that would be leading someone to have some of these experiences or behaviors? A lot of it depends on what they're reporting to you, of course, but you look at the entire process holistically and then go from there. So they get a physical, they have a medical doctor sign off. I can't find anything physiologically wrong. Well, okay, at that point, now you move into the psychological arena, and then you get a psychological assessment, and then have a qualified clinician look them over and assess if there's any kind of psychological problem there. And then usually, because so much of this is behavioral, it will lead to some kind of diagnosis at that point, which does not necessarily, just because there's a psychological diagnosis, and even if psychotropic medication is prescribed, does not negate the possibility that there's some spiritual causation. But still, the more benign treatment tends to be a essential part of this, because let me tell you, there's not a person that is going to experience any kind of demonic oppression, possession, obsession, whatever, and not have emotional or psychological consequences that go with it. So having a little bit of traditional therapy on the side is not going to hurt anybody, and we start with that process. If that works, and oftentimes it does, then that's it. Then it's just pastoral care from that point forward. And honestly, even then, once we have determined, after trying the physiological approach, that doesn't render any results, trying the psychological approach, that doesn't render any results, the problem persists, then we start looking more seriously at the spiritual. But even that in itself has a process of elimination before we go all the way to exorcism, which is almost never. Then it's just basic pastoral care at that point. You got to ask, well, what are these people doing? I mean, are they going to church every Sunday? Are they receiving the sacraments? When was their last confession? I can't tell you how many times I've had a client that came in, I need an exorcism. It's like, well, when was your last confession? It's been years. I don't even remember. Well, okay, let's start there then, because that might be one of the reasons why you're now feeling that there's something wrong. Let's go and take care of that. And so we go into the confessional, and sometimes they don't even know what to say. And I just kind of guide them through the process, and all of a sudden they start spilling the beans on thoughts that are on their mind and whatever it might be. And then you give them absolution, and isn't it miraculous that all of a sudden these problems go away now? That is a very common thing that I have seen. So we start with just basic pastoral care, when having Eucharist, having a confession, that kind of thing. Then if there's more to it, we might go to unction, a solemn blessing. Maybe if it's environmental, we go to the house and we perform a solemn blessing of the house, maybe a minor exorcism on the house. These are all things that we would lead up to. But when we start looking at an exorcism on a person, that's when all other things have failed. So the physiological stuff didn't render anything. Psychological didn't render anything. Pastoral care, standard pastoral care isn't helping. Now we got to go to the more serious methodology. And that's how we tend to do it. Now, I do want to add one thing here, and that is it's extremely important to understand that for the ancients, the word psyche, from which we derive our word for psychology, is the very Greek word for soul. They saw no difference between the world of the mind and the world of what we call the spiritual world. There was no difference for the ancients. And largely from the vantage point of a very honest exorcist who's going to be, pragmatic about this and not be too, like some of them are. I'm not going to name names, but you probably know who I'm talking about. There is always going to coexist the experience of the psychological with the spiritual. There is always all mental illness has a spiritual component. All spiritual illness has a mental component, because they're one and the same thing. Now, it's not so much about what's the causation, because the causation is both. They're the same reality. But the cure, the solution, could be multiple different variations. And so pastoral
I think there's more damage done in the world today, because you see, because we live in such a materialist cultural environment, we assume that exorcism would be the dangerous thing, right?
Yeah, right.
I think far more dangerous are the psychologists who are materialistic atheists, because they can't possibly be offering a spiritual cure.
Right. They ignore it
because they reject it. And so,
that's like a doctor that doesn't believe in kidneys. So if you have kidney failure, he's going to treat you with something else because he doesn't believe in kidneys. It's that stupid.
Well, well, we don't know what's wrong with you, so we're just going to diagnose you with depression and anxiety and give you these meds. Have a good day, God bless.
Schizoaffective disorder. That's the catch-all.
Yeah.
Just diagnose with schizoaffective.
Yeah.
Well, and the
talk about irresponsible.
Yeah, but sadly, the legal and the insurance industry have fed into this, because if a doctor doesn't give you those pills and you go and kill yourself, or you self-harm,
then there's liability and everything else.
Yeah. So, but a good friend of mine is a psychiatrist, right? So he's a medical doctor who is a psychiatrist, and he's an interesting guy. He describes psychiatrists as secular priests. Now, it's true, and I love that he says that, because he knows what a priest is, and so I think that's a much healthier way of looking. If you're a psychologist, a psychiatrist, then yes, you're not a priest in the same way as somebody that goes up to the altar and offers the body and blood of Christ. But I think it's a much healthier approach to say, I'm actually engaging in the spiritual well-being of this person. That is the essence, literally, like you said, of the word. It's the essence of the praxis.
Yeah, it is.
Is to and to. I think it's, if I knew a psychologist was a materialist atheist, existentialist, I wouldn't go anywhere near them.
Nope.
I'd much rather have a dodgy exorcism.
Well, yeah, because that's probably not going to do as much harm. I mean, what are you going to get? A little extra grace? I mean, come on.
Grace is always good.
All right. So I hope that, we could probably go into more detail, but that could almost be its own show too. So, and we've talked a lot about that before. What's our next one, April?
The next question is, why does the church seem to have so much wealth?
I love this one, because people forget that, the church has been around, the Vatican's been around for thousands of years. They and they are now custodians of these world treasures that are priceless, not because they're so valuable that they couldn't be sold, but because they shouldn't be sold. Nobody goes to the United States that has a big poverty problem and says, the Smithsonian's got that Hope Diamond. Why don't you sell that and give it to the poor? Well, neither can the Vatican just be like, let's just sell a few Michelangelos and give it to the poor. It doesn't work like that. They're also custodians. The Vatican's also a museum.
These are pieces of literal history.
You can't sell them. You can't.
I'd also love to stack up. I'd love to stack up what the Catholic Church has given to the poor over the ages with what the Smithsonian has given to the poor over the ages.
Well, I'd also
there's some shady organization on the face of the earth. Jokers.
I'd also like to compare the charity of the people that asked this question and compare it to what the church has done. So again, the church has obviously temporal goods, right? Art, architecture, but it also has charitable institutions that exist to facilitate worship, evangelization, and also service to the poor. Guess what? Taking care of the poor costs money. Okay, so there is a business aspect of it. However much we don't want to recognize that or wish it weren't true, it is the matter of fact. We live in a world that is capitalist, and therefore the church has to exist in that same environment, which means that the church needs money to do things. Otherwise, the church will fail to stay in business.
Also, a basic question, answers the problem. If the Catholic Church sold every single thing it possessed, including the shirt on the backs of priests,
right,
and gave it to the poor, would it eradicate poverty?
No,
it wouldn't be enough. No. It wouldn't be enough.
Jesus said, "You'll always have the poor with you." Now, what it would do is it would impoverish the arts. There's more. I hate this Marxist approach to unless you're helping somebody who's starving on the street, you're not helping. Like, there is such a thing as we had Michelangelo. Do you think Michelangelo would have been able to produce these works that still move people to tears today if the church weren't paying for him?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm going to move this outside of just the church. There are wealthy philanthropic people who sponsor the arts. Thank God for them. Mm-hmm. They might be Jews, they might be Muslims, they might be atheists. Thank God for them.
Yeah.
Because we need beauty. We need beauty as much as we need to, like it's both and. We need to help the poor and we need beautiful things.
Yeah.
And. You see, God is the great and. The devil is the not, no.
Yeah.
Less divide, split, and so it's such I understand I'm not having to go at the person that asked the question. I'm just saying that it doesn't take much contemplation for you to realize that there's a really silly proposition.
Well, I mean, I think it's also, look, you're looking at Vatican City, which is fair enough, its own country. But again, it's not as though the church is accumulating vast amounts of wealth and storing it for its own devious purposes. This wealth is there to facilitate the church, and a great deal of it is distributed to the poor. In fact, I don't know if it's still this way, but when I was a seminarian, this question came up back then too. And I remember, bringing it to a priest's attention and saying, I'm not sure how to answer this, because they were asking me. And the priest was explaining, he says, for the last, I don't even remember how many years he said, the Vatican was operating in a deficit. It had an operational deficit for many, many, many years because it was giving away more than it was taking in. And again, the treasures that you see and all the opulence that you see at the Vatican is just the product of history, not that, they built this stuff and they spent all this. Remember, all of this was donations over thousands of years that benefactors invested to build these structures. And of course, the Vatican comes out of a time where you had kings with great wealth that would support the church with this stuff. Look, there's a monastery or a convent rather out in England. I don't remember what it's called. It's defunct. I mean, it's a medieval convent, but the structure's still there, and it's very opulent for the time, and you know why it was opulent? It wasn't like a bunch of nuns was like, hey, we got all this money, let's go and live it up. It was because the countess in the county who ruled the county, right, administrated that county, had made up her mind to retire to the monastery, to the convent, as many of them would, okay, particularly if they were widows or something, and what they didn't want to lose their lavish lifestyle. So what they would do is they would build these lavish convents to live in for themselves, and the nuns got to benefit from the structure. But that's how a lot of this happened. Okay, so it's not, don't think it's like the church is like collecting all this money. Look, it's not Joel Osteen, okay? That's a whole different problem. That's a whole different problem.
But the essence of this is a political question, because the very people who would posit a question like that generally would be the big government types, right? The people that believe in huge social welfare programs and all the rest of it. Well, to them, I would simply say the United States government has far more money than the Catholic Church and wealth. So would you like them to sell off all of those public buildings and give that to the poor as well? Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't have these massive bureaucracies that rule your life.
Well, I might say yes. I might say yes to that. I might say yes to that.
You and I both. You and I both. But the very people, because it's a disingenuous question. The very people that would, because really it's not a question, it's an accusation. That is an accusation hidden behind a question. The accusation is the church is rich and you're all selfish bastards. Sorry,
say it.
And you're accumulating things to yourself. And the opposite is true. The opposite is true. And the very people that would ask that question are the ones that love to have these massive governments that involve printing money and borrowing and hocking your future in order to create these huge bureaucracies that govern your life. So I just call bullshit on the whole question, to be honest.
I do too, but we answered it, I think. So there you go. What's our next one, April?
I thought we should reverse roles for a change.
Yeah, that was good. I like it.
Well done.
Nothing like a little vulgarity to get the point across.
It was with passion.
What's our next one, April?
What's with the sign of the cross?
What's with it? It's just like this thing,
stand out in a crowd.
Just for fun. No, it's what is known as a sacramental of the church. There's several sacramentals. Holy water is a sacramental. The palms you receive on Palm Sunday are sacramentals. And the one sacramental you always have with you is the sign of the cross. You can always do that no matter where you are, which means you always have the cross with you wherever you go. And so it's an ancient prayer. Remember what he said earlier about praying with your whole body? Well, the ancients understood this better than we do today. And so this was a way of praying physically by acknowledging the cross had power. Okay, I go to the right. I do the Orthodox way. So it's in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So you go to the right shoulder in the Orthodox. In the West, you go left to right. Doesn't matter. The right to left, though, is older. So I use the older way. But it
mirrors the blessing the priest gives.
It's right. It does. And yeah, that's important. It's an expression of the faith and the redemptive power of Christ's passion, recognizing that the devil has been rendered inert. He has been completely sterilized. He's completely irrelevant.
He's defeated.
I said this earlier. This is relevant here. I said this the past week for Holy Week. A common phrase or common little adage that you hear in the Catholic Church is the greatest victory that the devil ever won was to convince so many people that he doesn't exist. And it's nice and clever sounding, but I prefer to revise that to say that the cross has defeated Satan to the degree that it doesn't matter if he exists or not. He's irrelevant. He has no power, none at all. The only power that evil has is what you perpetuate now. So you can't blame it on the devil, and you can't blame it on supernatural forces. It's your own appetite for sin. That's where it begins and that's where it ends. And if you don't like the devil, well, then stop sinning, because you're the one that keeps whatever that reality is that we call the devil continuously moving through the lives of yourself and other people. And that's a fact. Okay, that's not me being an esoteric Christian, kind of being a little metaphysical and unhinged. That is a standard Catholic Christian theology. And you know what? Even the Protestants can't argue that point. The cross has won. The victory's already, that's what he meant when Christ died. It is finished. It's finished.
Consummatum est.
Yeah, right. The devil has no power anymore. So he's irrelevant. Doesn't matter if he exists. Doesn't matter if he doesn't exist. It's irrelevant. So now what are you going to do about your sin? That's what's relevant now. What are you going to do about it? And so when it comes to things like the sign of the cross, it's to remind you that the cross defeated evil, that you don't have to live in sin anymore. You've been liberated. You're free. Just step into the light. That's it. That's all you got to do.
Same reason you wear them. Same reason. Yeah,
a cross, a crucifix around your neck. It's for the same thing.
By the way, an empty cross is not a sign.
No, you need the corpus. You need the corpus.
You should have the corpus on, but actually, Protestants say, "Oh, I don't have the corpus on. It's a sign of the resurrection." It's like, no, the empty tomb is the sign of the resurrection. Yeah. The cross is the symbol of death.
Yeah,
that's true. There was a pastor that said, I think it was one of the Ghost Adventures pastors that came on before you were invited, said, the cross alone is just a torture device.
It's true. Well, it's true.
You need to have the corpus.
It is true. He's right about that. So that's what the cross is. That's why we do it. That's why it's part. It starts every prayer. It ends every service. And it can be something you take with you. Even if you've lost your limbs, all right, you can still say the sign of the cross. You do it with your tongue.
Doing it right now.
You do the cross on the roof of your mouth. So the sign of the cross doesn't have to be the traditional. It can be any time you're able to forge the cross. The cross is now present with you. The grace of that
even in the liturgy,
sacrifice.
when the gospel's being read, part of the ritual, those terrible, awful rituals, is we make the sign of the cross on our forehead like this, and our lips and our chest. You know, God be in my mind, on my mouth, and in my heart. You know, do you have to? If you don't, at Mass, does anyone come and shoot you or say, right, you're not getting communion today because you didn't do that? No. These are just traditions that are developed. We've got in the group chat, you know, somebody saying the difference between praying on your own or where 2 or 3 are gathered. The whole 2 or 3 are gathered. Imagine 2 or 3 billion people gathered over 2,000 years who developed these ways of being together and praying together. That's what the church is. That's what we're describing. That's what we're experiencing, what the source of these questions are trying to seek. How have we ended up in this place? A really short answer is you can trust the church. I don't mean trusting them with your life savings. I don't mean trusting them, you know, in some ridiculous, you know, you're still a parent, you've got to look after your own children and all of that. But I'm saying the customs and the traditions and the liturgy and the way that we worship, you can trust that because it's been around a long time. And even the scandals that have crept up in the church, do you know what the difference is? The Catholic Church is still here to be sued.
Yeah.
You can't sue the pop-up church that came and went and did a load of damage and disappeared and no longer exists as a legal entity. Okay? So just bear that in mind. Oh, the scandals in the church. Yes, the scandals. It's made of frail humans, some of whom do evil things and that should be punished, go to jail or hang for them for all I care. But you can trust what the church has handed on to you because it's come from God and it's also survived the winnowing effect of time. And so these rituals, I'd far rather trust a ritual that's lasted 500, 1,000 years than I would one that was invented 10 years ago.
Well said. All right. What's our next one?
Next question is, why does the church oppose contraception?
Oh, this is a good one. Okay, so because the church always focuses on life, not death. The church is what leads us to life, okay? Because as I said at the beginning of the show, we don't know life. You got a little taste of it now that you call this life. This is not life. This is what is accurately called dying. What you're doing right now is dying. You're not living, you're dying. All right. And eventually, do nothing, you end up with death. That's it. But heaven is life. Okay. And so when you engage with birth control, now I got to be careful here because there's a few ways that we need to look at this. Okay. Every action that a Christian is to perform is always in favor of life. Okay. That's why it doesn't typically, it doesn't at all. It doesn't endorse things like euthanasia or right to die, and it doesn't endorse birth control for the same reasons, or abortion, because these are instruments that promote death or things in the direction of death, not life. Okay, so that's the philosophy behind it. So artificial contraception also is what eliminates the purpose of marriage. Because as I said also earlier, matrimony is not about falling in love as much as it's about creating new life. And so if you cut off the ability to do that, well, then you're cutting off by the natural law of what matrimony as a sacrament is there to produce. And so the church tends to encourage either self-control or natural family planning. There's no other thing that is allowable under the laws of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, that being said, I'm going to now give you a more pragmatic answer for the Nicolaitans Catholics out there, because we do have the Nicolaitans Church does have a different take on this. And this is, I'm not going to read you my canons word for word, but I'll give you the shortened, for brevity's sake, I'll give you a shortened version of it. All right. It is not the goal of this church, and it should not be the goal of any church, to get into your bedroom and regulate the activities that you hold there with whoever it is that you choose to do them with. Okay. It's not the job of the church to regulate that. It's not the job of the church to be involved in that. So my approach is more pragmatic. as long as you're open to life, as long as you get married with the intention to produce children when that is necessary, when that is viable for you, and that might not be for everyone as soon as you get married, because I mean, look, you could very well get married when you're young and vibrant and at your best to have children, but financially it would be crippling to you, particularly today with the way the world is.
Especially nowadays.
Especially nowadays. So maybe you have to wait to get more established. And what are you going to do? Wait till 40, 45 when it's going to be dangerous for your wife to start having kids that late? I mean, it can be done, but you know, the odds of danger increase at that point. Not like it is when you're in 20s, when you're primed for it, okay? Or even your teens, honestly, if you want to be very biological about it. You know, your late teens, early 20s are when you're at your prime for it. So most people are not financially stable enough to have children at that age. So the institutional sin of our lives being taken away from God and put more towards the secular interest, profit, and everything else have led to a condition where we can't really live a perfect life for God anymore. I'm not going to say you're going to go to hell if you feel that in order to maintain intimacy with your wife and to keep your marriage healthy, that you're going to refrain from sex, or worse, risk family planning, which there's a joke about that. What do you call Catholics, good Catholics who use family planning? You call them parents. Because it doesn't work. It might work for a while. It's not going to work forever. Eventually, you know, something's going to get through.
But that's why I prefer it. Because actually,
it's
amazing. We live in the richest countries in the world.
Yeah.
And we can't have children because we haven't got enough money. Like, no, sorry. You know, I mean, people that live in sub-Saharan Africa, they're having children. You know,
they're not living in America.
No, I know that, but what people mean is I can't have a child and everything else that I want in life. I'm not saying it's easy, but you know, I have skin in the game because I'm speaking to you as somebody that had a child by the time he was 22. So you know, and my advice is the earlier the better, personally. But look, to come back to the point you're making, though, there isn't, and actually, if you read John Paul II's letter about it,
Humanae Vitae,
see this in it. Yeah, you know, the church certainly would not say that if a married couple, once she's been through the menopause, they should stop having sex, right?
No.
So that's not the teaching. I think, you know, we are suffering the effects of this. Don't get me wrong. The first point you made, I'm with. The purpose of this isn't for me to get involved in what goes on in your bedroom. I mean, like you said, that's something for you to discern yourself. But the church must have as its premise the promotion of life, because it's a reflection of Genesis. Go forth and multiply. You know, that we get to co-create with God, which is something the angels don't get to do, right? And so we have this unique and amazing commission. It doesn't work out for everybody, but the church has to always, therefore, back the side of what will lead to life. Now, individual circumstances, I'm with you, and people can figure that out with their priest.
And I think they have to. And see, that's where I'm going to say that rather than declare this legalistically a sin, that now your soul's at risk for going to hell because, you know, your wife's on birth control or something. I have a problem with that approach to it because, again, that level of regulation. It's one thing to say philosophically, this is what we strive for.
But that's what the church has to do.
Yeah, and that's fine.
The purpose of doctrine.
And I don't have a problem with a doctrine that says this is the ideal. I have a problem with saying you're going to hell for not meeting that ideal. That's my problem.
And I would say people should read Humanae Vitae closely. Because I think that is a pastoral response to that, to what may have been the prior implication of what the church was teaching.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I do agree. And there are individual pastors that have handled this very well in pastoral settings and very poorly in pastoral settings. It exists. Okay. My point is, and again, the ruling that this is one of the few times that the Nicolaitan Church actually deviates somewhat from the Catechism of Rome. And that is that rather than to put a blanket statement and say it's prohibited, we're going to say that that's the ideal. You have to choose for yourself whether or not that ideal is practical for you to meet at this time in your life.
And separating sex from its intended purpose has had devastating effects on our culture.
Well, that's true, but at the same time, you know, a married couple that doesn't engage in sexual activity is not going to be very good for very long.
No, and that's why I'm saying I agree with you. In the context of a married couple, I think it is a different question.
Yeah.
But there's no one can deny that the sort of because don't forget, even the Anglicans were opposed to contraception.
Yeah.
You know, every church was opposed to contraception until about the 1950s, 60s, when we had this sexual revolution, and nobody could honestly say that the great dilemma was married couples deciding how many children they were going to have. You know,
well, there's a difference between giving contraception to single people because now you got a bigger problem. Now you got fornication. That's another problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying is that. And the cultural effects of that have been far worse than, you know, people feeling bad about themselves within a marriage.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it's been devastating to our culture, and has led to, ironically, the reason that people are delaying having children, because now we've got this two-income trap that's flowed from this, which means you have to be married in order to afford a house in order to then have a child. Like, it's been a complete inversion of what was going on before. And so the social effects of people disregard or separating out the sexual act from its intended purpose, which is within marriage and for the procreation of children. And I'm not speaking as Mother Teresa on this. I'm just, I'm saying the general principles have to apply.
I see what you're saying. I just think
we've seen the results.
I think the question was asked in the context of married couples, though, because I mean, it is applied the same way, whether you're married or not. The church is prohibitive on it, and I think that there are circumstances where there's a different approach that might be necessary in that respect. But you can teach this is the ideal, but also teach that you might not be able to meet that ideal. Sometimes the ideals are outside of the range of possibility. And
we do believe in grace and forgiveness too.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of the church. I think so. The church shouldn't be ruling down on you; it should be helping you to achieve your best life. All right. So I think we can probably do one or two more questions, maybe one more question if it's a big one, or two if it's a short one. So what's our next one?
This question is: why is divorce and remarriage considered sinful?
Okay, this is a good one because Matthew chapter 19. Christ himself. Christ is very rarely ever explicit about anything, and this is one of the things he was very explicit with. He demonstrated without any pretense, no parables, that marriage is cannot be dissolved. It's an indelible mark. It's a sacrament that is just like baptism. You can't undo it once you've done it. Okay, you are forever. The two become one flesh. There's no separating that at that point. Once it's been done, it can't be undone until death. Right. Now, civil divorce, as a lot of people think, will dissolve the sacramental marriage. It does not. It does not. So this is where it becomes problematic, because the remarriage aspect is where it becomes, where divorce is an issue. Now, let's say we were talking about this the other day. Let's say you're in a very abusive relationship, okay, and let's say you're a woman that's being physically, sexually, who knows, abused by your husband. The church would not say you got to stick it out. All right, no honest pastor would advise that. Okay, no good pastor would. You need to be safe, and they should help you to get yourself into a safe space, and that will require separation, and maybe for legal reasons, civil divorce. The problem is it does not annul the marriage. Annulment is not a divorce, and it's not, the state cannot grant an annulment any more than the church can grant a divorce, okay? The annulment is also not something that is arbitrarily given. It is something that has to be decided, usually in a canon law, a court of canon law, with a canon lawyer that advocates for you to determine whether or not your marriage actually even happened. If it is determined that it did validly occur, then there is nothing that can be done, and you are called to a life of celibacy after that. You cannot get remarried. If there are grounds for an annulment, then only after that annulment, when the church has determined that the sacrament was not either consummated or something. Remember, to have marriage, it's not just about going to church for the priest to bless you. The sacrament actually occurs when you have sex after that blessing. The sexual union is what completes the sacrament. So, if that never happened, let's say you married someone for convenience sake and, you did that in a Catholic church, but you never had sex with them. Well, that would not be a valid marriage, and that would be grounds for annulment. That would just be one example. But the fact is, that's what the church has to determine in the West. Now, in the East, it's handled very differently. The Nicolaitan Church handles it in the Eastern sense. The Eastern Church looks at it this way. It says, look, we've got an ideal, just like the contraception. We've got an ideal that we try to strive for, and men are going to be men, and women are going to be women, and humans are going to fail, and marriages are not going to always last. So rather than hold people to a standard that could literally produce misery, it is better to see this as an act of penance and to require them to go through a penitential process, which involves confession, counseling, pastoral care, all this stuff, in order to get themselves prepared to be able to receive a new marriage. So remarriage is possible, assuming they go through the penitential rites, because the divorce is a sin still, even in the East, but it's looked at as something that can be forgiven. But the West looks at it and say, well, it's an indelible mark. You can't undo it unless it never happened. That's how the West looks at it. The East is like, look, you're going to sin, but you can move on from that sin, and we give you new life. It's
partly because of how it's done. Because in the West, we take vows to one another.
Yes, and the church, yes.
That's what can't be undone.
Yes.
In the Eastern Church, the priest puts the crowns on you. So that, in a sense, the church marries you, the church can unmarry you. Mm-hmm. In the West, you've done it. So two communists, as long as they truly consent to a lifelong union involving sex and children, two communists behind the Haywain, that marriage cannot be annulled if that is true.
That's true, yeah.
The Catholic Church cannot annul that marriage. You don't have to be married in a church for it to be valid.
That's true.
So because people fall foul of this all the time. I wasn't married in the Catholic Church, I need an annulment. It's like, doesn't work that way. There's sacramental marriage and non-sacramental marriage.
Yeah, I don't consider legal marriages to be an issue in our church. If somebody's like, I don't know what to do. I got divorced. Well, the first thing, whether you were married in the church? No. Well, then let's not worry about it, because it wasn't a real marriage to begin with. We'll just do confession and then move on.
But the Western Church doesn't apply that principle.
No, it does not. It does not.
It's all about what was the mens rea, what was the intent of the mind when you made those vows. Now, and that's why, and actually Pope Francis, I'm not his biggest fan, but on this, I think he was on the right lines. I mean, he removed a layer of the annulment process, which, was unduly burdensome. Didn't change the principles of nullity, but said, look, we don't need two different courts, right? So, but he emphasized one of the strongest, or one of the reasons for annulment that's used the most is immaturity. Now,
that you couldn't have consented correctly.
Because you didn't know what you were consenting to.
You need intent you need proper intent for the sacrament, and there's no proper intent there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so he said, and really, what 20-year-old knows what for the rest of their life means. Right. He actually said that explicitly, and I thought that's actually quite right.
I mean,
and see, that's why the Orthodox Church is better. That's why the Orthodox Church is better, because it's just make it a matter of penance. Now the Orthodox Church, there's limits there too. I mean, they'll give you that one, and they'll let you remarry a second time. They won't let you necessarily do it a third. You
can get married up to 3 times.
Yeah.
It's nothing beyond that.
Nothing beyond that. But the third one, not always. It's possible.
It's exceptional.
It's exceptional. Yeah. 4, impossible.
And they begin, other than the first, if you have, like you've said, it's called a penitential marriage, right?
Yeah, right.
So if you're married again, it's called a penitential marriage, and it begins with an acknowledgement of that. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, this isn't some, the East is the get out of jail free card. It's you got to own it, because marriage is also a public institution as well as a personal relationship. And so this is where marriage has gone so wrong in the West. We think it's about, falling in love and sending cards and flowers, and then it's just you and you and you. And
glorify me on my wedding day. I want to wear that.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah, it's what it is.
Go to them, and even within the church, but especially secular weddings, they just become ludicrous.
Oh, I know.
A complete invert.
I hate them.
Everyone I've ever been to, I thought, you've got grounds for annulment here.
It's true.
It's so open to that. So, but actually, marriage is a public good. It's a public declaration, and divorce is therefore a public bad. And do you know what? We can all agree with that. Divorce is not something anybody would seek to have in their life. And so it is detrimental to everybody involved and to wider society as well. So, but I'm glad that at least the church, the Catholic Church, the Orthodox churches, they at least deal with the issue. They don't sweep it under and make it again legalistic. Yeah. They realize, they make it pragmatic and say, hey, look, we're all sinners. The church is here to help you to arrive at a place that's better than where you're at now. Can't do that by keeping people locked forever in a condition that's miserable, or ignoring it and saying, "Oh, don't worry about it."
Well, like we were talking about, Jamie knows someone in this situation. She left the church because they said no.
Yep.
And now look at her. Now the church, because the church did not handle it in this way, they lost a soul. Who knows what could happen now, right?
Yep.
It's unfortunate. Anyway, that's the end of the show. Now I'm going to schedule, since we have some open slots, I'm going to schedule part 3 this season. Okay, so we can continue this. I like this. This is a good show. And we might need a part 4, April. I don't know. We still got quite a few sections.
Too. Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, thanks for the questions.
Yeah. Real good conversation, guys.
It was very good. Now, next week, okay, we're back for good now, or at least for the season. Next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will be talking with a new guest about mind control. So never dealt with this topic before, and should be really interesting, considering that the world is pretty weird right now.
Yeah.
And people are easily manipulated. So it should be interesting to see what they have to say about this. That's next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Jamie, thank you. Father Chris, thank you. April, thank you. I want to thank our moderators out there, Tracy, Moosh, Paula. Thank you so much for being out there, keeping the chat in order. And I want to thank all of you, whether you are on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, for joining us tonight. I know there's a lot of other things you could have been watching, but you decided to spend it with us, and don't think that goes unnoticed. We appreciate each and every one of you. We love you all, and we thank you for being with us tonight. We'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.
Take care, everybody.